everyone, and a very warm welcome to the first ever virtual Women and Worth Summit. I want to start by saying a huge thank you to you for being part of this community. If there's anything the past 6 months has taught us, community is essential and is everything in linking each other and helping support each other, both in our professional and in our personal lives, which have become all the more entwined as so many of us have integrated work into our homes or had to make difficult decisions as we adjust to this new environment that we're now all living in. It's so great to see so many of you on here today. Thank you for joining. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Juliet Scott-Croxford, CEO at Worth Media, and I hope you're all doing well following what continues to be a difficult and challenging time for so many people. In March of this year, Worth held its annual Women and Worth Summit in downtown New York City. Little did we know it would be our last physical event of the year and the only opportunity for the Women and Worth community to convene face-to-face for who knows how long. We called the event our Power Forward Summit, and the program, the sessions, the speakers and attendees explored and defined what it means to lead with purpose, how to mobilize communities to impact change, as well as share best practices for overcoming systemic barriers that hold women and minorities back. 6 months on, we've experienced a global pandemic, the devastating murder of George Floyd and countless others, not to mention nearly 11 million jobs held by women disappeared from February to May, erasing a decade of job gains by women in the labour force. So as a female CEO and mum, I'm acutely aware that powering forward is now more important than ever, which is why we've convened this week's virtual summit and brought the community together to explore how life has changed over the past 6 months and to discuss how now more than ever it's important that we collectively power forward together. So we have over 40 speakers ranging from C-suite executives in traditionally male-dominated industries to pioneering company founders to those who are changing the way that we work. And we really hope to give you, our community, the opportunity to learn, to share, to be supported and connect with the other people in our community and the speakers who have forged ahead during this tumultuous time, but who have also continued to continue their work to impact change, to lead with purpose, to overcome the systemic barriers holding women and minorities back, from things like access to pay equity, promotion, board promotions, wealth accumulation and capital. So before we get started with our first speaker, I'd like to say a huge thank you to our partners, of which this would not be possible. A huge thank you to UBS Private Wealth, Sharon Sager, David Siriani, Chris Amo, Jamie Sears and the team at UBS. We'll be hearing from Sharon and Jamie in 2 separate sessions tomorrow. One, Jamie's talking about how we accelerate progress and our career through self-advocating, and then Sharon is in our member session at 5, talking about financial empowerment. Thank you also to Indeed, our other partner, Carmen, who heads up marketing in the Americas. She'll be sharing some closing reflections on Thursday. And we'll also be hearing from Chris Hyams, their CEO, and Kate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary. We'll be interviewing Chris later this afternoon. Thank you also to LG Signature for sponsoring this summit with us, and a special thanks to Michelle Acosta-Donovan, who saw the value in creating a partnership with our Women Worth platform. If you don't know, LG Signature is a ultra premium brand with a select family of products that are designed to provide state-of-the-art living experiences, which are all the more valuable right now given how much time we're spending at home. LG Signature has an amazing female spokesperson, a renowned ballerina, Misty Copeland, who is with the American Ballet Theatre, and we did a great feature story recently on Misty with our editorial team, which you can find on worth.com. And they have an array of products, one of which you'll see later on, which is the LG Signature's wine cellar, which has a very sleek design and holds up to 65 bottles of wine, as well as has refrigerating drawers that can store your favorite cheeses and other things. Also, thank you to New Music USA. We'll be hearing from Vanessa Reed, the CEO and president of New Music USA tomorrow, and we'll hear a performance from Layla Adu, who's an up-and-coming musician in one of our closing sessions within the membership. If you're interested in registering for our membership, drop us a line at community@worth.com, or you can click the subscribe button on the top left of the worth.com homepage. We would really welcome you into that community. And today we're also joined by a team of high school and college age girls from ETRA, which is a program started by Ilana Rea that offers mentorship and aims to inspire confidence in young women to stay true to what they really love. These bright, ambitious young women are joining us throughout the week as editorial correspondents, and they're writing up daily recaps about what they're learning each day, which we'll also be sharing with you. Before we jump straight into our first speaker, we encourage you to use the chat function. Please do ask questions and make comments throughout the afternoon. We'd love to hear from you, and we'd love to give you the opportunity to obviously share your thoughts and ask questions to the speakers as we go as well. So without further ado, we'll go straight into the first session. The average amount of money earned by women throughout their careers is approximately $900,000 less than that of men. We know only 3% of female founders receive VC funding. That number is 0.3% when it comes to women of color. And the COVID pandemic has erased a decade of job gains by women in the labor force. So where does that leave us? I'm thrilled to introduce Sally Krawcheck to this session, whose professional mission is to get more money into the hands of women, thus enabling them to live better lives and to unleash a positive ripple effect on our families, our communities, and our economy. Sally's the CEO and co-founder of Ellevest, a digital-first, mission-driven investment platform for women. So Sally, welcome.
Oh, Julia, thank you for having me. Good to be here.
Great to see you, Sally. Thank you for being here. First off, let's address the title of this session. What does the landscape look like right now for funding and investing in women and minorities?
I think it was, it's sort of the best of times and the worst of times. It's in a way the worst of times because of the statistics you just shared. And in fact, you started with, as so many people do, the gender pay gap, that 82 cents to a man's dollar, much less for women of color, slowly moving in the right direction. But very few of us are talking about the more important, to my mind, money gap, which is the gender wealth gap, which is 32 cents to a man's dollar. So pay is what we earn, wealth is what we keep and have. It's been moving in the wrong direction. And with the pandemic is moving even more quickly in the wrong direction. And that's true whether, women have been losing their jobs at a disproportionate rate. And it's also true for women who are privileged enough to work from home, where we are losing productivity while men are gaining productivity. You hear the men sort of like, oh my gosh, I'm getting so much more done now that I don't have a commute. And the statistics back it up. And women are like, I'm drowning here. I'm drowning here. And they've got the kid on the lap and the whole thing. So it's the worst of times. In some ways, it is becoming, I hope, the best of times, because you can't look past it anymore. That women, the Ellevest research is showing that women are saying, wait a minute, it is now clear that this is broken. It is clear that no one's going to come in and fix it. We don't need another research study to say invest in women or have more women in your C-suite. If it's a Tuesday, there's another piece of research that says it. So it's broken. The research isn't going to fix it. I've got to do something. And I hope that energy moves us forward, because if the research were enough, we'd have women run startups, capitalize to the same degree as men, and we've had a lot more women in the C-suite.
And Sally, Ellevest recently added racial justice portfolios into your intentional impact portfolios. What criteria are these portfolios using to screen companies, and what kind of impact do you hope those new portfolios have in the long term?
Yeah. So if you back up again with the best of times, there is a recognition by all of us that our money has power. Every dollar we spend, we're voting. We're either voting for the restaurant we've loved for years and trying to help them stay in business, or we're voting for Amazon. That's okay, no judgment. Every dollar we invest, we're voting, right? We're putting that capital behind, you know, the business model of a company. And by the way, that's true whether we mean to or not, right? If we don't know it, we're still voting. At Ellevest, in our private wealth business at Ellevest, we offer the opportunity to invest in a way that we call intentional impact investing. And our core, our flagship offering is the intentional impact portfolios. When we launched them just over a year ago, we said our value, our core mission, to get more money in the hands of women, whether that's helping them through investing so they can earn more, or investing in companies that help advance women. For so many, it had been, let's invest in companies that have CEOs who are women, board women. Great, amazing. We also said there are also things companies do or don't do that can advance women or hurt women. For example, data privacy issues hurt everyone, hurt women more. Environmental issues hurt everyone, hurt women more. Product safety issues hurt everyone, hurt women more. And this spring, as the renewed movement for racial justice was taking place, if any of us wasn't reevaluating where we stand on things and whether we're part of the problem or the solution, then we weren't paying attention. And we did that at Ellevest and said, wait a second, if our intentional impact portfolios are all about advancing women, we need to specifically address the issues that affect Black women, women of color, Indigenous individuals. Are we doing that? And what we found is that in many ways we were. That if the environment's deteriorating, it affects people of color more, it affects Black people more, environmental racism, right? And we looked and said, where are places we can do more? Well, a clear one is the prison ecosystem, the prison industrial ecosystem. And we looked and said, you know, make sure we're not investing in that, but how about those companies that are benefiting from it, that are profiting from it, that are supplying it? All right, let's divest from that. And so with this public equities portfolio, you know, we added that racial justice lens with a view that it really is part and parcel of our mission to get more money in the hands of women and to advance women.
That's great. And focusing on women in the past 6 months, what has the last 6 months impact been on women when it comes to investing, and especially female entrepreneurs receiving funding? Because I think we've seen a whole swathe of small businesses being wiped out. We already saw that 3% of VC funding was going to women. That number is a lot less for women of color. What impact have we seen since then with the last 6 months?
It's not good. I think there's research out from the All-Raise group of female women venture capitalists that shows that the funding has dropped overall, but has dropped for women more. This is pretty typical, unfortunately, of these types of dislocations where those who have less lose out more. It's 2 steps forward, maybe 3 steps back sometimes in one of these downturns. So that's some tough news. You know, let's hope, because women-run businesses have had to do more with less, that as we get to the other side of this, they were able to buckle down and do even more with even less, but it's not good news. On the other hand, in terms of women investing in themselves, what we at Ellevest call the gender investing gap, are you investing in the markets? You know, the bear case, honestly, Juliet, you remember on Ellevest when we started as a digital first, back in the day before we had our private wealth business, but digital first was, I remember a venture capitalist, well, Ellevest can grow in good times, but when the market dislocates, you're going to collapse. Well, the great news is that what we suspected all along has held up, which is that our attrition rate, people closing their accounts and leaving, has been low single-digit % annualized, okay, even during the spring. And during this spring, we had net inflows every single week. So that means when the industry had net outflows that were so bad, they were worse than the worst months, we actually had inflows. And the thing that we've always thought we saw, which is that women tend to stand firmer when times are volatile as investors, actually has played itself out.
What role can we play in that, Sally? Like, what role can enterprise firms, corporations, this community play in closing that investment funding gap?
Well, it sort of comes back to what we were just talking about, which is your money is power. Now, we women might not have as much of it as men do, but we have trillions of dollars, and we account for 85% of consumer spending. 90% of us manage our money on our own at some point in our lives, whether we want to or not. And so, look, Ellevest, we started our private wealth business when we had a very sharp, very savvy, very sophisticated, very wealthy woman say to us a couple of years ago, I want you to start, you should start this business, you should start this business, you should the private, given your background, Sally, running Merrill, running Barney, City Private Bank, you should start the, no. And then she said, I'm tired of having my money managed at a company that I wouldn't let my daughter work at. And so whatever lens you want to provide for yourself, for again, your dollars voting for something is, do you want to support this company or that company? And you're not allowed to get upset when the corner restaurant goes out of business through this pandemic if you weren't ordering in from them, if you weren't al fresco dining with them. You're not allowed to be upset. You're not allowed to oh, boo-hoo, because you had a vote and you decided not to use that vote. Likewise, those companies that you want to be successful, we all have a hand in. And if we as women were to say, we're going to view our money as a vote and direct it to companies whose values align with ours, then we could change the world pretty damn quickly.
I love that. And a warm welcome to those that have just joined us. We're speaking with Sally Krawczyk, CEO and co-founder of Ellevest, on what the landscape looks like right now for investing in women and minorities. Sally, Ellevest's core mission is to get more money in the hands of women. So, and you touched on some of the real present challenges we have right now with working mums and the work from home environment. So how do we do that right now with women being hired back into the workforce at a slower rate than men?
Well, look, first of all, I don't think we've fully recognized how bad this is, where you've got a double-digit % of women saying they feel like they're going to have to leave the workforce because of the demands of home. The destruction to our economy, or at least the measured economy, if that happens, just, no one is really speaking about at all. And as mentioned earlier, for those who just joined, what you have is women whose productivity is being hit if they're privileged enough to work from home, whereas men's productivity is going up. So we've gone into the homes, and instead of rethinking, massively rethinking the share of household chores, unpaid labor, we've really doubled and tripled down on it as it's happened. And so, first of all, I think we need to realize how very tough it is. I think we then need to think in the next administration, in the next election, how we want to cast our votes and what we want to lobby for, write letters for, write emails for, bother people for. My vote coming out of this is how in the world we don't have a mandated paid parental leave as the richest country in the history of the world. And given that that's where the wage gap really kicks in, the fact that we don't have this. So I think we need to be thinking about what are the structural changes that are needed on the other side. Now, if you're an individual and you're in this situation, I think you got to do what you can do. And it was really interesting because I've spoken to, or have been in conversation with a couple of, or listened to be fair, a couple of really very prominent feminists. I was listening to Gloria Steinem last night when she did an event for Time's Up. Listening to Teresa, who's the head of the Ms. Foundation. And it was interesting to hear these feminists talk about self-care. And self-care as something that isn't a nice to do or take a bath and candles and bubble baths, but as really something, as an investment that you make in yourself so that you can go out and fight those fights. And so we think at Ellevest a lot about investing, saving, taking financial steps as being financial self-care, and that taking the time to do that for so many women, it just feels like, oh, I have so many other things to do. But that act, the old put on your oxygen mask before assisting others, which we used to hear when we used to fly, like it was no big deal. The self-care and the financial self-care, the spending time on the money to get yourself in a shape on the other side where you had, you know, when we're back to normal, whatever that is, you've got some financial degrees of freedom, is something that I know we've all got lots to do, but is a really important use of time.
I'm going to come to a couple of questions, and a reminder, please do share any comments, questions for Sally. Yana Good, Nigel asked, does your platform allow for funding for women-led non-profits?
Well, and in fact, we don't, no, it does not. And, you know, we're not, a lot of people do think of us as a crowdfunding organization. You know, our core, we're an investing business. And so we invest in our digital business for our clients in ETFs that we manage for them in order to help them achieve their goals. And in our private wealth business, we invest also in alternatives, et cetera, public equities as well, of course, our core intentional impact portfolio. And in doing that, for those who so choose, we can invest in some cases in women-run businesses and very often in companies that help advance women.
Thank you. And a comment you made on sort of voting with our wallets. Graciela, she said, "Help me properly attribute the quote as it chilled her. I'm tired of giving my money to companies at which I'd never let my daughter work."
I'm tired of having my money managed at a company I wouldn't let my daughter work at.
And are you able to elaborate?
Well, I mean, I'm not going to tell you who her firm was, but let's just say it was when she elaborated and she began to ask some questions. It was at a company that still required their employees to sign non-disclosure agreements and to go to arbitration in the event of sexual harassment, which did not align with her values. It was a company where she felt like there were some hidden fees, which didn't align with her values, that were not well disclosed. And it was a company at which her financial advisor, and this is actually a pretty well-known, pretty successful individual. And she said she couldn't believe it that in it was probably 2018 or so, that their male financial advisor never would look her in the eye. And that she would go in with her less well-known, frankly, less wealthy husband. And he would spend the whole time talking to him and she would be made to feel like a dope. And she said, how have I done as much as I've done and felt as, you know, been as successful as I've been? And, you know, because it's numbers, I'm made to feel like sort of a dope, which actually, by the way, gets to a broader issue that we're fighting at Ellevest that's probably worth bringing up, that the root cause of some portion of this wealth gap is the fact that we do tend to, as a society, still talk to girls and boys and women and men differently about money. Or maybe one should say talk at them differently about money. That we all know the male money media, whether it's CNBC or Bloomberg or Crain's or Barron's or whoever, there is no female money media. When articles are written to women about money, something like 2/3 of them are about how hard it is and how difficult. It doesn't have to be so hard. Financial planning doesn't have to be very, very hard. And I don't have the statistics, but it feels like the other 1/3 of the time it's patronizing. Take this money quiz. Are you a Gary or a Miranda when it comes to money? And look, you know, we're all strong people. But if you're given a message often enough, you oftentimes say, you know what, maybe that message is right. Particularly, by the way, here's another alarming factoid, which is that girls today get lower grades in math for the same answers as boys. And so our society ingrains in all genders that they're good at math, we're not so good at math, and there's a really corrosive effect to it.
I'm intrigued. What advice would you give to parents that have sons and daughters around the money and investing talk?
Yeah, a lot of people say, well, what should we tell them? It's what you show them. It's is mom in with the money, right? Are both of my parents talking about not just the budgeting and here's the coupon to take, to the store and, but is it, mom's checking the brokerage statement, right? Mom is negotiating, to buy the house. Also, mom is signing the mortgage. It's just left over from when dad brought home the bacon and mom, fried it up in a pan, that those relationships were set and still, so deeply embedded for so many of us.
Sally, thank you. Before we close out, I want to ask, what steps do you think we can all collectively make to power forward in 2021, given this environment that we're now in?
Yeah, look, I think for those of us who are experiencing difficulty, we just one foot in front of another, one foot in front of the other. 2020 is a dumpster fire. But, we're all ready for it to be over. So just do your best, right? And depending on where you are, that may mean looking at your expenses and cutting your expenses. It may mean upping your investments because you're underinvested. It may mean, it may mean any way, maybe prepared to get a new job on the other side of this. For those who have the privilege to do so, again, getting back to, I know I'm going to sound like a broken record, but your money is a form of power. In capitalism, it is a form of power. And for those who are fortunate enough to be able to place some votes with their money, it is worth sitting down and really thinking about what those votes are that you are placing. Every dollar you spend, every dollar you invest is supporting something. Make sure it's supporting what you want it to.
Sally, thank you. You're such an inspiration, and I just want to say thank you for being part of this community and for all that you're doing to help women power forward and the support that you're giving to women and minorities to drive for a more equal, inclusive economy. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, Juliet, it's my pleasure. And as I love to say, I've yet to find anything bad that happens when women have more money. So I love fighting this fight to get more money to women. It's a pleasure to be part of the community and part of this event. Thank you for having me.
Cheers to that. Thank you. Next up is Ashley Etienne. Before that, we're going to take a 30-second commercial break, and then we'll welcome Ashley. Hi everyone, and welcome back to the Women and Worth Virtual Summit. So with Kamala Harris's historic nomination as the Democratic vice presidential candidate, politics are starting to look even brighter for female politicians. As more women run and enter into office, how is policy being affected? What hurdles still exist? Will we still see a focus on issues such as education and healthcare, which are really in dire need to be tended to, and at the moment tend to divide rather than unite. So I'm thrilled to be joined by Ashley Etienne. When Ashley spoke in our March Women and Worth Summit, she talked about the rise of women in politics and the importance of having a female VP. She's served as a trusted advisor to President Barack Obama and Speaker Nancy Pelosi, and since then has recently been appointed Senior Advisor for Strategic Planning for the Joe Biden presidential campaign. Hi, Ashley, thank you for joining us.
Hi, Julianne, how are you? Good to see you.
And you. It's great to see you. And you're in Texas, right?
No, I'm actually from Texas, but I'm in Washington, D.C., in the center of it all.
Okay. So okay. Well, it's great to see you. And so first up, just tell us about your new job working with Joe Biden and the role that you're playing in the campaign, because that's, you've gone through an extraordinary change since we were together in March.
Yeah, definitely. I'm very excited about joining the team. You know, there's nothing more consequential than what's going to happen in November for not only our country, but for the world, you know, which is very true for women. Pick a constituency, you know, everything that we believe in is on the line here in this election. And I just couldn't see myself sitting on the sidelines. Not that I ever was, because I was working for the speaker, but, you know, I just wanted to get even more into the fight. So I'm excited about the opportunity, definitely driven by the mission, and really can see no better way to spend my time than to work towards affecting change in November, electing Joe Biden, electing the first female vice president, first female vice president of color, so it's just a really exciting opportunity. And again, as I mentioned, like everything's on the line. So I'm all in.
And how different is it? I mean, just in terms of the campaign, it's incredibly virtual. What's that like being involved in running it?
Well, I mean, the reality is we're doing something that no one's done before. No one's ever run a virtual campaign and run it virtually. So it feels like a 90% digital, if not more, digital campaign that we're running. And as you know, Democrats are legendary for our ground operation, our GOTV operation. So it doesn't seem like, given COVID, that we'll have the opportunity to really deploy, our strong suit and our strategy. But, there's room and opportunity for us to engage everyday Americans to come out and drive and turn out the vote. But yeah, so it's, I mean, as you mentioned, it's a challenge, and one that we're tackling. I think we're doing some really innovative things. We've got the right candidates, I should say. We got the right message. All the facts are on our side. The momentum and the energy feels like it's with us. So it's just a matter of, working our plan and executing on it and staying very focused. It's a crowded space. It's a lot of issues every day. There's another, to quote the last speaker, dumpster fire that's happening that we have to either put out or address. So, but I feel like we're doing it incredibly effectively. The challenge for us is just, again, remembering who we are, making sure we're articulating that to the right communities, making sure they understand what's at stake in this next election and what we have to offer. And that's a new direction for the country.
So I want to talk about women in politics. We saw Hillary being attacked for being a woman, and we're seeing some of those same attacks with Kamala. Have we seen any progress for women in politics since 2016? And why are we seeing a repeat of some of that stuff?
Yeah, I mean, when we met last fall, it felt like, I'm not sure when it was, but when we met several months ago, I think I said at that time, a similar question was posed to me: have we made progress? And I said, yes, we have. We've now demanded and created an environment where we will get a woman VP candidate, not first, but a woman VP candidate. And that was before Joe Biden announced that he was going to choose a woman. So, I mean, I feel like definitely there's progress being made, and that progress is ground up progress. There's a lot of pressure that we've applied as women across the broad spectrum of women, every woman hitting the street, in protest, engaged in their communities, running for office. I mean, there's record number of women in the House, record number of women running. There were record number of women running in the last presidential. So I see that as great progress, because we're forcing our issues. We won't be denied, and we're creating an environment where we can't be ignored. So I count that as progress. And I think having, there can be no greater symbol of progress than to have Senator Harris as the VP nominee on our ticket. So yeah, I mean, people ask, is there progress? Sure. And do we still have a long way to go? Definitely. But in the past 100 years, we marked 100 years of women's suffrage. There's no better, I think, testament to the progress and the commitment and our dedication to this issue than to have Kamala Harris as the VP candidate. I mean, it just is kind of a brilliant thing. And I think the stars are aligning and the universe is lining up right. But I think the one thing we have to be aware of, and that is we can't do it alone. It has to be a collective effort, that we have to continue to band together as women and demand change and demand to be heard, demand to be at the table, and demand that our issues are addressed. And I think of course, given our ticket, Dr. B is a strong woman who's incredibly intelligent and effective. You got Kamala Harris, Senator Harris, who's the same. And then you got Joe Biden, who's been committed to these issues for 40 plus years, right? And so I think there's a lot of great progress that'll be made in November, but there's already some that has been made that we need to take good credit for.
And what are some of the main hurdles that still exist in politics for women today?
I feel like most of what I've sort of observed over the past, maybe since 16 and even before 16, that the greatest hurdle is the ones that we erect, the ones that we construct for ourselves. Because the reality is when we run, we win. And we've seen that. The speaker is a speaker of the House, the most powerful, second in line to the presidency is a woman, right? We have record numbers of women that are running and that have won that are in the Congress, record number of women of color that are actually in the Congress. So I feel like the only hurdles are the ones that we erect for ourselves and that we construct for ourselves, because it's proven that when we decide to run and we commit our minds to it and we hit the streets, we get results. So I think that's the one thing that we should not lose sight of, is that, when we demand it, the systems have responded. Now, again, I think, I've said this earlier, like, are there still challenges to addressing issues that face women? Yes, I think the greatest challenge is that you have so few women on the other side of the aisle. There's fewer women on their side that are also, that we can align with and say, hey, wait, can't we agree as women that we need paid leave? Like, can we agree as women that VAWA should be enacted, violence against women should be enacted, that VP Biden championed years ago? Like, shouldn't we have alignment on that? And I think the greatest challenge has been that they don't have enough women on their side. And that's been in the Senate and in the House, that has been the greatest hurdle to progress on women's issues, is that we sort of all are concentrated on the Democratic side and can't get alignment with our colleagues on the other, because there's too few women that agree on these issues on their side. So I think that is the greatest hurdle in terms of policy. But in terms of running, I think I think there are no challenges other than the ones that we erect ourselves.
And I'm curious, just your own personal experience of going into a new role and being a woman in this role. Any sort of personal anecdotes you can share that have been challenging or surprising to you?
Yeah, I think what I've learned in this business is that if we allow it, we will be someone's box to check, right? Meaning, everyone's all, post George Floyd's death, everyone's like looking for a Black board member, looking for, assessing their leadership and like, oh, I need a Black woman, or, oh, I need more women of color, we need to be at the table. But I think what happens is there is not a commitment within organizations to ensure that those women are empowered. I think there's not a serious commitment to assessing the environment in the culture in some of these organizations, be it corporate or political, to determine whether or not we're actually arriving at the table with a voice, and that voice is respected and is heard, and that people are making room for us to affect change. So I think so I think that's been my experience is too often we look for the superficial fix and don't really create change within our own environment, so that women do have greater voices and influence on an organization and its direction, and that their voices are heard and also respected. So those are some of my observations. I think as a woman of color, it's harder because we're a double minority. I think, I tell people all the time that there are few people I know who've reported directly to a woman, and there are even fewer people that have reported to a woman of color. I don't really know anyone that, other than those who work for me, maybe a handful of others that have reported directly to a woman of color. And I think, I think as more of us are elevated, women and women of color in some of these roles, it challenges the system. And I think getting back to my other phrase, which is collectively, we need to band together as women and ensure that we're working in tandem to change the whole of the environment, not for me as an individual, but for all women, right? And when we come to the table, not wanting to be the only woman at the table, but to bring everybody with us and to argue and confront these issues on behalf of everyone, that's when you change the culture. And I think, I don't think we do that often enough, and I think we need to do it more frequently. Like when it's kind of like that phrase, when you see something, say something, right? And so what affects my sister affects me in the end. I am a sister's keeper to some degree. And when the environment is changed for her or for me, it should ideally change for everyone, right? Not just on an individual level. But so those have been some of my experiences. I've had, my deputies who've literally, I've given a directive to, and they've asked me, well, did the white guy approve it? Like, what do you mean? Did he approve it? Like, I run this operation. I need you to do what I'm asking you to do. Well, And then, you know, I've been forced to, and I don't, you know, this is not fair, but, you know, but I've been forced to literally have to pick up the phone and like call the white guy and be like, can I do this? Yes. To then tell this person, you see, the white guy said it was okay. Can you actually move forward with this? And it just, and this was a female deputy. And I'm like, you're really only perpetuating the problem. And if we could see sort of that and you know, and understand that, like, look, my plight is connected to yours, right? And the only way we're going to change this for the whole is for us to understand how it affects us individually, and that it affects me differently than it affects a white woman, but it's still the same effect and still the same sort of cause, right? And that the only way we can address it is collectively and not perpetuate some of these problems. I've even had some of my, recently, one of my white male deputies say, well, you want me just to send the email? I'll just send the email and tell everybody I want, we won't have a meeting. I was like, no, you're perpetuating the problem. You can't do that. Like, these people have to be responsive to me, you know what I mean? And the real question is, why wouldn't they be? Why not? You know? So yeah, so I think those are my experiences. And just to wrap it up and reiterate, I think, you know, we have to understand that we have a shared plight as women, and what affects one of us affects us all, that we have to collectively confront these things in our work environments and hold people accountable and ourselves accountable too. And if we don't do either of those things, then it won't change for the whole. And that affects policy as well.
Right, which we'll come on to in a second. I just wanted to welcome people that have joined into this conversation. We're speaking to Ashley Etienne about the rise of women in politics. And a reminder, please do share your questions in the chat. We'll come to a few of those in a second. Ashley, we talked about this the other day, and you touched on it just then, which is kind of the role of corporations. And after the devastating murder of George Floyd and the racial justice movement that sort of assumed after that, there was a lot of corporations that came out and stated their mission and their values and their connection to diversity and equality and inclusion. What's the role of corporations, and how do we hold them to account and ensure that they're walking the walk as well as talking the talk?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's such a good question, especially when you consider how much money was doled out to organizations that are doing criminal justice and social justice reforms. I think corporations play a huge role. I think it's important for them to not only publicly state their positions and their values, but then to put resources behind supporting the cause itself. But I think the bigger question the bigger issue is what I kind of got to a second ago, which is, how are they themselves reflecting those values internally, and whether or not that's actually real. And the reason why I say this is because I remember when I was working at the White House, and I'm not going to mention her name, huge executive African-American woman in the tech space, big name, executive of the year, like everything. And so we're talking, and I'm asking her, I'm like, tell me, like, you're the first in your business, I'm a first in my business, like, what's that like for you? And her point was, you know, her story was similar to mine, which is like this constant undermining of your authority, microaggressions, like all the things we read about and hear about. And I'm like, wait, but not you. I mean, like, everyone, like, you know, rolled out the red carpet, and you got all these stories about diversity works, and this is the shining example of how diversity works. When the reality is, if you peel back a couple of layers, it's not actually working at all. You know, she had to share her role with a white guy who's 3 levels below her and like less qualified than her. And I'm like, wait, I've had those same experiences myself. So it's not enough to publicly state your values and then to, you know, put some resources behind that. But I think where corporations make the biggest change is the internal examination and determine whether or not they're walking the walk and not just talking the talk. And I think that's where, you know, corporations have the biggest impact, is when they're modeling, right? Not not just sort of the superficial stuff, because we've had a lot of that over time, but like, how are you modeling this? And then using not only executives, but women up and down the scale to tell that story. You know, like, it seems too often the women who are a little lower down, you never hear from. You only hear from the executives who have, you know, vested interest in saying positive things about their company. You know, it's this movement that you and I talked about, the social media movement, or if you can call it a movement, but the hashtag #ThisYou, which I just thought was a phenomenal way of like calling out corporations. But I think the only downside, and calling out corporations to hold them to account to their words and their actions and their values. But what I thought was the downside of it is that, like, it almost forces a posture where corporations are doing even more superficial work to address it publicly and not really doing the self-examination to determine whether or not their values are aligning with their actions. So that's where I think they could have the biggest example. The biggest example is ensuring that, again, your internal culture aligns with your values, and that you're modeling, and that you use your own employees to tell that story, to, you know, sort of create a dynamic where other corporations are following suit.
And it'd be great to kind of go fast forward a year and sort of reassess, like, what progress have we made? Let's have a common way of measuring the progress.
And you and I talked about that. I was like, I would be fascinated to see a study about these big corporations that have thrown a lot of money at these issues, and someone to go in and examine whether or not they're living that commitment. I think that would be fascinating. And I'm like willing to put $3 behind it, because that's all I got in disposable cash. But you know what I mean? So it's like, I just think that would be fascinating. And then that, you know, and then again, it is, you know, it would make the point of like, are you living, are you a living example of that? And then how can force, you know, again, creating an environment where we're forcing other corporations to follow suit.
A question on policy, and how is it being affected? And you mentioned the sort of lack of women on the other side as well. When women are in power, do we see a focus on issues such as education and healthcare that tend to unite rather than divide? Because that's our hope.
Yeah, I mean, I think definitely. I think, you know, I think when we think about women, we always get to the softer policies like education and healthcare. But also, too, from our perspective, it's economics. You know, economics is a huge driver in this, right? Like, it determines whether or not you have adequate, sufficient healthcare and affordable healthcare. And it also affects the same when it comes to childcare, right? And housing, and like, how do you build wealth, right? All of that is important, at least from the Democratic perspective. So whenever we talk about women's issues, every issue is a woman's issue, in our opinion, right? There's not one issue that's not a woman's issue. And we drive as hard on the harder issues, the economic issues, the access to capital. How do you build wealth? How do we position more women to do that? We run those issues as hard as we do education and healthcare and all the others, because they're all interwoven and interlocked, right? I mean, they're all, one affects the other, right? You can't have one without having the other. So as I said earlier, I think the challenge I found in advancing policies, which is just mind-boggling, is if we just take the issue of paid leave. Of course, we're for paid leave. We've always been for paid leave. But what baffles my mind is that the women on the other side, which are few, don't agree with that, or pay equity. How could you not agree that women should get paid equal amount as their male counterparts? I mean, it's just good economics. It's good health, it's good family policy, it's good women policy, it's good economics, right? And even, you know, even for the family. And so that's sort of what has baffled me. And I think that's what stands in the way. Too often we can't get alignment on the other side in terms of policies. So, but I can tell you what the Biden campaign is focused on. It is just those issues that I named. It is access to capital. How do we increase access to capital? How do we create a government that reflects the American public? So how are we putting women in cabinet positions where they're running agencies, massive agencies that are making policy change and affecting policies, not just where you've always seen women, but in new places, in new spaces, right? And of course, healthcare is way too expensive. You got to shore up Obamacare, which is what we would do to keep it intact more women have been covered under Obamacare, especially those with pre-existing conditions and anything else. Again, education, paid leave, you name it, all good policies, like we're there. The problem is that we just haven't found a partner on the other side. But when we take back the White House, there's an opportunity to create a whole lot of change beyond just what can happen in the legislature. So I think, it's incredibly a hopeful time for women and families. I think there's a lot at stake. As I mentioned before, healthcare is too expensive, childcare is too expensive. Access to capital has shriveled up to some degree. Home ownership is declining. Women-owned businesses are going down because of COVID. And the current president is making all of those situations worse for women and families. So we're ready to offer a new direction. We propose policies that, again, I think are consistent with empowering women, enriching our lives, and putting us on a path to grow our own wealth and leave something behind for our families. And so again, I think November is going to be critical in that, and we'll see what happens.
I'm going to come to some questions. Katie Sheehan, is Katie there? Can we promote Katie in? Hi, Katie.
Hi.
Hi, Katie.
Hi, how are you?
We're good,
Wow.
Thank you. What's your question for Ashley, Katie?
Yeah, I'm just intrigued in getting more perspective on what's the strategy around getting people to vote. I know there's a lot of contention around mail-in voting, but there's been some about face on that, which is interesting and probably a story for another day. As well as, obviously, we're in the midst of a pandemic, and what is your campaign doing to make sure people are either getting there or mailing in their votes, since that's probably one of the biggest ways for this to work, right?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, that's a great question, Katie. It's actually perfect timing. Yesterday, Monday, it's like in the COVID, it's like time doesn't even matter anymore. I have no idea. I have no idea what month it is, what day it is. I just know we got 50 days to the election. We rolled out a new platform, I Will Vote. So what I Will Vote is it enables you to quickly go in, put in your address, and find out exactly how you can vote. Because as you've mentioned, with every passing day, there are forces that are making it harder to vote. But what we're trying to emphasize is that there are a lot of options, and there are a lot of safe options to exercise. So I Will Vote is a new website that we launched, a new app that we launched, where people can go in and put in their zip code and easily find out your polling location, what day early vote starts, how do you do it, how do you change your registration, it's a one-stop shop on elections. And so we've launched it and have pushed it out to all of our channels. So I think one thing you can do, and everyone can do on this call, is literally send people there to find out the answer to that question. Now, as I mentioned earlier, the challenge for us is that, you can't run the typical ground, as it looks right now, as it stands right now, the typical ground operation that we would, where we're knocking on doors, driving people to the polls, all of that sort of stuff. So that creates a challenge, right? And we just have to figure out how to overcome that challenge. But one way that we've we're doing that is making sure that people are highly educated on what their options are. And so I Will Vote is our tool that we're launching to drive people there and to engage them in voting.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Katie. And then there's another question, Ashley. Do you think this virtual campaign will be more effective, and what are the biggest benefits you see on this edition?
We're in the middle of it, so it's hard to determine whether or not I am hopeful that it will be effective. I will quote the speaker in saying, I think the Democrats' best organizer is Donald Trump himself. So I think to some degree, we always have Donald Trump to be our strongest organizer, but we're in the middle of it. So I think, that's yet to be determined. I think we're making a lot of headway, a lot of progress. I think there's a couple of different ways to look at it. It's like, because we're virtual, it provides you an opportunity to really cover more ground than if you were traveling, right? If you spend a lot of traveling days, you can only really go to maybe 1 or 2 towns and maybe 1 or 2 churches or maybe 1 or 2 restaurants. But now, because we're virtual, you can cover more ground, but the only downside to that is you're not touching and feeling people, and people want to be touched and felt, and I think that is something that we're trying to wrap our heads around. And we have some really good, innovative ideas that are coming down the pike. And I'm excited about employing those and seeing how they work. But, again, this is a challenge that nobody has faced, and we're in the middle of it in real time. And so we'll see. But again, we have a lot of creative things that we're going to be pulling off rather quickly in the next month that I think will make people feel like they're a little more engaged in the campaign.
And actually, before we wrap up, Susan Manuel made a comment about being the only woman of color in a sort of large financial firm, and it's not easy being a woman of color running an organization like that. What advice would you give?
I feel like she should call me. I need the advice. Like I'm still trying to figure it out. literally, the amount of effort I have to put into like coming up with strategies to go around people's, people running interference on my operation, or trying to cut me off at the knees, or their egos being in the way. Like literally every day is like a 3-dimensional strategy to get anything done. But I think, I'm not even joking about this, like literally, I think we, as women and women of color need to have this conversation. I think I've hardly ever had the conversation being told from the perspective of a Black woman, right? Lean In was fantastic. I love the book, but like a whole lot was missing for me, things that I think, Cheryl probably couldn't identify with, because I'm a woman of color and she's not. But definitely things we have some alignment with, which we can identify with. So I think that there has to be a broader national conversation. I've been saying this. I was like, I think I may have told you this. I'm like, if ever I write a book, it won't be about how I impeach the president. It'll definitely be about like, so you're a woman and a woman of color at the table, now what? Like, what do you do now? You know what I mean? Like, so the table feels like it's shrinking around you, right? You feel like you're being elbowed out. Like, then what do you do? So I would love to get all the advice one has. I'm sharing as much advice as I possibly can. I mean, I think everything is situational. I think there's some fundamental things that I think, people, we can all agree with, like building allies are key, right? Understanding your principles and sort of the aims and the goals, sort of being able to internalize that. I think, some other things that have worked for me is, managing up better and well, I think has helped me. I think understanding my power, and what I mean by that is, when I come to the table, I'm not just coming by myself. I'm coming with, in my case, because I'm a political person, I'm coming with the entire Congressional Black Caucus, for example. I'm coming with all the Women's Caucus, the Progressive Caucus, like picket, like I'm not showing up alone. And when you understand that you're not alone in this, then you understand your power a little more differently. And then you understand how to pull the various levers and leverage things to your advantage. So yeah, I mean, I think I have some answers, but I think this is a conversation that needs to be had more broadly. And I'm, again, open to all advice. So please have her reach out to me and tell me how she's managed it. Cause I don't have all the answers, and everything's situational. And I think that we can all benefit from that advice and that wisdom.
You're so inspirational. We talk a lot about having not allies, but advocates, and especially.
Yeah. Oh yeah. That's a great one.
So they're not passive. They actually, they speak up, but they also encourage you to self-advocate for yourself as well.
Yes. That's I think that's a brilliant point. I forgot that one. I think advocates is a big one. And it's like, how do you turn allies even into advocates is a lot of work, right? And I think in a business like mine, it's in all of them, I don't think it's any different from like the financial sector, but the elbows are incredibly sharp, and the higher you go, the sharper they get. And people tend to be more self-interested. Right. And I think where we go wrong as women is we become more self-interested and we lose sight of the larger cause, right? Which is that we create an environment where we all can be successful, right? Understanding that if you're silenced, then I am too, to some degree, right? And how we cannot perpetuate these ills in the system itself. So yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of challenges, but I think the only way we get there is, to your point, is figuring out how we can do it collectively. And then that's why I love spaces like this. I think I was telling you, I was like, we don't have these opportunities in DC to coalesce and to, you know, have safe spaces where we can talk about these issues, right, as women and women across industries and learn from each other. So hats off to you guys and Women in Worth and everything you guys are doing, because it's just really phenomenal. And I just feel blessed to be part of it. I hope you guys don't let me go after the campaign season's over. I hope that this is like a bond that we can continue to grow and develop, because I've been enriched by it, and I know you guys are doing that for other women.
Oh, thank you. And we love having you as part of this community. So thank you, Ashley. Just before we finish, what bright spots do you see on the horizon? And give us some words of wisdom about what steps you think we can collectively take to power forward in 2021.
Yeah, I mean, a bright spot is Senator Harris. I mean, I don't know anything brighter than that. You know, she's intelligent, strong, capable, brilliant. I mean, pick an adjective that's amazing and it applies to her. She's inspiring. She has the ability to reach broad audiences and connect with them. She has a lived experience that a lot of people can identify with, and that reflects the true essence of, and the best essence of America, I should say. So for me, she's a bright spot. I'm really encouraged by her and the possibility of her winning, because, you know, I think as women and women of color, we bring everyone to the table, everyone's issues to the table. LGBTQ, picket, when we show up with everybody. And so that to me is encouraging and very exciting. I think in terms of how can we move forward collectively together, I think it is understanding that our futures are interconnected. They're interrelated, that one can't succeed without the other. And that we should have this shared common bond and cause, really, and that we should, you know, as much as and often as frequently as we can, combine our efforts to change these environments, from policy to the workspace to to our personalized picket. You know, that the power that we have is when we do it collectively and we bring, you know, everyone's battles and struggles and plights to the table to solve together. So that's what I think we can do, is just not lose sight of the cause and how interconnected it is, and then to hold ourselves and the systems accountable. But ourselves first, accountable to each other, and then the system.
Thank you, Ashley. How do people get in touch with you if they want to reach out?
Oh my God, I'm so untouchable, right? I'm like, I don't know. People, I will say a couple things. Can I just plug I Will Vote Again? It's spectacular. People need to go there, share it, spread it. It's the best engagement. We got to get people to turn out to vote. If you want to get a hold of me, you can reach me. Should I give you my email? It is Etienne, ETIENNE @joebiden.com. And then personally, you can, you know, hit up all my social accounts and ping me.
And if you're okay with that, we'll share it in the chat.
Yeah,
shortly.
it's totally fine.
All right, Ashley.
You have a screaming subject line, because I get a lot of emails.
Yeah, okay. Ashley, thank you so much. Good luck with the next 50 or so days.
Julia, I appreciate you.
I appreciate you, and thank you again for all your support. You're great, and I'm for one, I'm rooting for you. So good luck.
Thank you. All right, same here. Rooting for you guys too. Be well.
Thank you. Be well. Welcome to everyone to the Women in Worth Virtual Summit, which is over the next 3 days. Thanks so much for joining us, and thanks for all your engagement and great questions so far, and for being part of this community. Next up, we're handing over to Kate Luzio, who's moderating our Lonely CEO session, Using Your Mission to Innovate. And we're thrilled to be joined by CEO of Indeed, Chris Hyams, who's also a male advocate, and I know was engaged in that conversation with Ashley as well. So welcome, Kate, and welcome, Chris. How are you?
Hello, thanks for having me.
Hi, Chris. Nice to see you. What did you think of the first two sessions?
Well, unfortunately, I only got to join about 20 minutes ago, but the last 20 minutes was amazing. Ashley is inspirational, and yeah, I'm just going to be holding my breath for the next 50 days, I guess.
And Chris, whereabouts are you located at the moment?
Austin, Texas.
Okay.
I've lived in Austin for the last 21 years.
Okay, well, it's great to see you, and thanks again for being a partner and for being a speaker on this. And Kate, welcome. I'm going to hand over to you now.
Great. Hi, Juliet. Hi, Chris.
Hi, Juliet. Hey, Kate.
Hi. All right. Well, we're going to kick it off, and I am going to dive in. So I'm Kate Luzio, founder and CEO of Luminary, and Chris and I had an opportunity yesterday to have a great chat. I thought I knew a lot about Indeed, but I got a whole new education yesterday, and I'm excited because of so many of the things that you talked about yesterday that we're going to talk about today. A lot of times people think of innovation in the sense of product and how they're generating revenue and changing their business and how they're evolving. But now more than ever, we're really looking at companies with that sense of purpose. And this session is going to be talking about using that mission, and Indeed has a phenomenal one around innovation, invention, and ownership. But before we go there, I would love to just hear a little bit more about your journey, Chris, because you've spent a long time in engineering and product and over 10 years at Indeed, and now the CEO since 2019. So what, as the CEO, sort of what brought you there? And then we're going to get into innovation and mission and invention.
Great. Well, first of all, thanks for having me. It's really great to get to be a part of this. So I'll back up a little bit. I haven't been in tech my whole adult life. And so my journey here, I think like a lot of folks, is not necessarily linear. I started out, I studied architecture as an undergrad. I grew up kid of the 70s, and Mike Brady was an architect and thought that being an architect was amazing. I found out early on in my academic career that I had zero talent whatsoever. And so I ended up graduating not knowing what I wanted to do. I met my wife in college. We moved to a small town in Vermont. I grew up in LA. She grew up in New York. We wanted to get away from the big city. So we moved to Woodstock, Vermont. I taught public high school, special education for 2 years. Loved it. Most challenging thing I've ever done in my life. We moved to Los Angeles, where she was going to graduate school, and I played music professionally for 3 years, tried to become a rock star, did not become a rock star. And then ended up really just right place, right time. My wife got a job at Rice University in 1993. We moved to Houston, and I could take classes for free as the spouse of an undergrad, and sort of thought maybe this computer science thing could be interesting, and just found out pretty much overnight that this was how my brain worked, and this is what I wanted to do for the rest of my life. That was before the web really was a thing. And so the 3 years that I was in grad school happened to be really transformational. It was the Mosaic, which was the first widely available web browser, came out. The first version of the Java programming language and the Linux operating system, and Amazon.com, all launched in the 3 years that I was at Rice. I ended up getting a master's in CS, and then joined the tech world. And so I've been doing that for the last 27 mumble years. But all of that informed me, even though I didn't know where I was going or have a linear path. And so I worked as an engineer. I moved into a leadership role at the startup that I came to in Austin, mostly because I was one of the few adults there. So I was working with a bunch of 22-year-olds who were brilliant. I was 30 and married with one kid, another kid on the way. And so they asked me to sort of step in and be in charge. And I found that I cared about, people and about the technology. And my joke was I could speak human and binary, and that turned out to work. And so I found out that leadership thing was appealing. I left and did my own startup for 6 years. And then so I landed at Indeed in 2010. And we were at that point 130 employees. About the whole technology team was 45 people in Austin, and I joined as the head of product. And 10 years later, we're 10,000 people. We're in 15 countries, and it's been a remarkable experience. So my path to the present has really just always, first and foremost, been focused on the mission of the company. So you talk about mission, and that's what attracted me to Indeed in the first place. And so the mission, simply put, we help people get jobs. It's on the t-shirts, it's on the business cards, it's on the walls. But it really is truly, I mean, there's a lot of missions that sound good and they make people feel good, but it really is the operating instructions for the business. And so it is both a connection to humans. It's a constant reminder that what we're doing is something that matters in people's lives. I like to say we've got your family and your health, and employment is really one of the top things in most people's lives. And it also is how we decide what we're doing with our business and where we're going to go and where we're not going to go. There's a lot of ways for a growing business to expand and to make money by going into related businesses. For us, it's a simple filter. If it doesn't help people get jobs, that's not something that we're interested in. And it helps guide us towards, where we're going in the future, which is when I started at Indeed 10 years ago, we were really a search engine. So we collected jobs from all over the place, and people would come and they'd search and they'd click on a job, but then they left. And there's a big difference, between clicking on jobs and actually getting jobs. And so we help people get jobs as a reminder that what really matters is the end result. I don't care about how many visitors we have. I don't care about how many ad clicks we have. What matters is how many people are actually getting hired. And our whole product and business strategy over the last 10 years has been based on getting us closer to the hire. So how do we build new technologies and experiences that help engage job seekers and employers closer and closer to the thing that matters the most in the end?
So I could literally go into every section of what you just said. I'm going to talk about a few, but I want to go really back when you said you were hired because you were an adult. And then I laughed because I've heard that before when I was hired as an adult. And then you said you were 30. So when we think of being an adult as 30, I guess that's true. But a lot of us have a lot more years of experience on there now. So I love that. You have pivoted quite a bit in your career. And we hear that more now again than ever, people pivoting, especially women, multiple careers. And you've certainly built up your career trajectory to now be leading a tremendous company. But you just said something that I don't think you often hear from CEOs, particularly today, around it's not about the ad clicks. It's not about how many people are using this. It's about how many jobs people get. That is your KPI, number one.
Correct.
But that's a different way of thinking as a CEO. That's truly thinking about leading with the mission versus the mission sort of comes second, and it's about profit, it's about exposure, it's about engagement. Of course, you'll have that with all of the other things and those tools that you mentioned, but really at the end of the day, that drives you as that CEO. How do you drive that into your people?
Yeah, so that's a great question. So I joined Indeed. For anyone that doesn't know, the company was founded in 2004. I joined in 2010. So when I joined, it was small, but it was a real business. It was profitable. It was growing like crazy. It was solving a problem that hadn't been solved before. And all of the ingredients, like you can look back at where we are today, and all of the foundations were laid. It was a complete and total package. It just needed to, give the opportunity to keep going. So what attracted me when I first went there was that mission. When I first met with the founders and the early employees there, that was all I heard for the first. It was my fourth meeting with our co-founder, Ronnie Kahan, who's the guy that hired me, before he ever showed me a P&L. And I was shocked that the company was, it was a lot smaller, but it was profitable and it was growing. But what was most important to him was there's a few founding principles of the company. And the first one was we put job seekers first. And any marketplace business where you have two sides, so we serve employers and job seekers, you have to make a conscious decision who's more important. And most businesses, just by default, will choose whoever it is that's paying the bills.
Right.
Employers pay Indeed, job seekers don't. But Ronnie and Paul's decision on day one was that we were going to put job seekers first. And if we made every single decision through the lens of our whole product kind of mantra is what's best for the job seeker? So that's the question that everyone asks. And if you make every decision through that lens, which means doing a lot of things that are inconvenient for us, things that our customers actually don't like. So we hide a job seeker's telephone number and email address on a resume and make all the communication go through Indeed to protect job seekers' privacy. Really simple example. That's still the number one complaint from employers consistently for the last 10 years.
Really?
And because, a recruiter just wants to pick up the phone and call someone.
Oh.
But we have 180 million resumes on Indeed now, and it's because job seekers trust us. If we use that lens to make these decisions, and we really make it simple, fast, and safe, and better for a job seeker to find a job, at the end of that successful job search, there's an employer who made a hire, and you can build a business on top of that. And so we're really, and it's not that we don't also try to do great things for our customers, and we have great customer service, and we deliver great results, and we charge less than everyone else, but that comes secondary to putting the job seeker first. And so that was all there when I came to Indeed. So part of my job, I sort of had this realization early on in my career. I was one of those kids who always wanted to be the best, best baseball player and the best drummer and the best student and all these, and I was never the best at anything. I was really good at getting competent really fast, but there were always people who just had some natural gift that didn't have to work very hard, and they were just better at everything. What I figured out in my case was that I was really good at recognizing what was good, not only that something was good or not good, but also what it was that made it good. And then, so part of my job is just like, I'm the chief reminder, of those things. So the mission, part of it was when we sort of codified, the mission was already there, but, there was one sort of, fateful day where we kind of came up, let's put the words together and put it on a t-shirt. And then I just decided that every time I got up in front of the company, the first slide that I would show for every presentation was just going to be big, bold, Indeed blue with 60-point Helvetica bold font. I help people get jobs. And that's the first thing I say when I talk outside of the company, when I talk inside of the company. And so part of it is just, if that thing really is something that you think is important, you have to say it over and over and over and over and over again, and then actually live it. So the more important thing is, you can say stuff all you want, but how do we make those decisions, and what are the things that we say no to, and what are the things that we say yes to? So that's a big part of my job, has just been to, especially as the company gets bigger, how do you really simplify things? I can't say 175 things a week and have any of that stick. So what are the one or two things that you're going to talk about, and just reinforce those? And then really, do you live those values? Do you make decisions every day that reflect what those things are that you say are most important?
It's so important that, again, that those values are a foundation of the company, and why you have, again, 10,000 employees, and the company has grown really dramatically in the last 10 years, right? I mean, when you think about that, you joined as number 130, 10 years later, there's 10,000 and 15 countries and 30, cities, or 30 offices over 15 countries. We spent some time yesterday around talking about the pandemic, and again, going back to that mission, for the job seeker, and I love how you say that's who you are focused on, but at the end of the day, you need people to do that, right? And you as a CEO are leading through unprecedented times. And some of the examples that I'll quickly sort of go through, and I by the way, I was talking about this all last night to my boyfriend, because I just thought, you said low tech, high touch. Pre-coronavirus, everything had to be, so high tech, and everything is a kind of an experience. So a couple of the things that you've done, since you closed your offices globally in March 3rd, every Wednesday, 1 hour per week, you do a live Q&A with your employees worldwide. And you have done that since March 3rd, and that's continued. Low tech, high touch. You have an interview series, Here to Help, which is like a podcast where you interview one-on-one an employee within the organization, learning what they do. You also, because pre-coronavirus, you were traveling and going to these offices where you could have that face-to-face, you do weekly random lunch with 4 employees from each location. When you said yesterday, the engagement level on the staff has just grown and grown, that you are more connected now than ever. Why do you think that is when we're living in a virtual world? And then take that to the job seeker, because that's so important now as we all are looking to create jobs, hire those that are unemployed, etc.
Yeah. So it is counterintuitive, and it's not like we sat down on March 4th and said, here's the game plan, this is what we're going to do, and this is going to work really great. It was really just in the moment of, what can we do right now? Well, let's just get on and see what's on people's minds and let people ask questions. And there were enough questions. I mean, we had, I think there's 10,000 employees. We're in all these different time zones, but we had like 7,000 people on the first Q&A. And so clearly there's a lot of interest. And so you got a lot of questions and you answer the ones with the highest votes. We didn't get to a couple hundred. So we said, all right, we'll do it again next week. And as we did it, what we found was people kept showing up, and it became a much easier way for us there were so many moving pieces in a business always, but over the last 6 months, there's been more changing, because whatever else used to be constant is not constant. And how people are dealing at home with, in the spring, it was, oh, my kids are now at home and I'm a teacher as well as, an employee. And you have the people who are single parents with multiple kids. You have on the other end of the spectrum, younger employees who are living alone in a city with no family, who are stuck inside and isolated. So we're dealing with not just what's going on with work and how are we shifting and adapting, but what's going on in people's whole lives. The interesting thing is that has always been true. No one ever comes to work just as a worker. We all have worries and concerns about our family, about our partner, about our kids, about our community. What this whole thing has exposed, and I'm looking and seeing a little bit of your house, and you're seeing my office, and we're in these meetings all day, and cats are jumping on people's laps and kids are crying in the background. And so I think what has always been true is just suddenly becoming really obvious to us is that we are a lot more than just how we show up at work. And that became so clear so early on that just even the starting, so when I do these random lunches, the first question now always is, how are you doing today? When I start the podcast, that's the first question every single week is, how are you doing right now? And some people answer a little more generically, but most people will pretty quickly get into, here's what's going on, here's how I'm adapting. Those answers have changed a lot in the last 6 months, from like, my kids are now, I'm a teacher and I don't know what I'm doing, to, oh my God, it's summer and the kids are crawling, up the walls, and what do I do now, to, oh, my kids are going back to school. Or even for a lot of people, I mean, we've just been through, I think everyone here probably has been through the same thing. There's multiple seasons over the last 6 months. The first few months for us as a business was, how do we just get everything stabilized so everyone knows where they are and then everything's going to be okay, and what can they do, to then, oh, we're going to be here for a while, and how do we settle into that, and how do we actually now, what can we do that we couldn't do before? So the communication thing, it's a long way of coming back to that, but there's a whole lot of things about what's going on right now that are so much worse than they were before, but there's new opportunities that come from this. And anytime that there's a massive shift in the ground underneath you, you can just look at the stuff that you don't get to do the way that you used to do, or what are the new opportunities? So, I mean, I could have been doing Q&As with the whole company all along. We could have been doing that for the last 10 years. We didn't. There was something about this because we felt a need to be closer to people, to hear. The Q&A is really a two-way thing. Part of it, it's a platform for me to be able to just let people know what's going on right now, that because things are changed from last week. But it's really an opportunity to hear what's on their mind. And because everyone is voting up, I mean, it's like doing a pulse survey every single week. Maybe we should be doing that too, but like, what if people are asking questions about, we need another work from home stipend because the last one that you did was really great, thank you so much, but now I didn't realize I was going to be here this long and I need a new chair, or whatever it is. When that gets, 450 votes, that this is something that's on people's mind, and if they ask over and over again, with everything that's gone on in the world as well. So, I mean, so you had the the murder of George Floyd and Black Lives Matter. I mean, all these things, and just to be able to every single week be out there and to get in front of people and to say, we know that this is, affecting you, that you're bringing this all to work. Some people are having a much heavier time than others. And so those of us who are more fortunate are doing okay. We need to be able to support other people. It's been really transformational. So I think a lot of this stuff is going to, I think, stick with us. I don't see now, whenever we get back to working in offices, and we can talk more about what the future might look like with that. I think we'll stick with the weekly Q&As. I mean, I think it's just such an amazing and simple concept. Like, we used to spend so much time producing these big quarterly all hands with the videos and all this kind of stuff. We still do that because it's nice now that we talk all the time. It's great to take a step back and say, hey, what did we accomplish over the last quarter? But that serves a different purpose. We're not trying to catch everyone up to everything that's going on. And we know what's on people's minds, and they know what we're thinking about. So it's more of a milestone. And the podcast has been amazing too, because it's such a great way to give people insight into what's going on in different parts of the business, in different offices. An hour-long conversation, you can really learn a lot about a person, about their experience. And since our business is a people business, just giving exposure to different people has really been, and it's been great for me. I've learned so much just in the conversations that I've had with people.
And I can imagine, again, you go back to this idea, and I know it's an overused word, innovation. I run a business that's focused on community. Community tends to be an overused word now too, but they're both important. I can imagine in the town halls and the roundtables, as well as this podcast, you're not only hearing what the employees need, you're hearing about what the job seekers need, right? And that is another tool that you use around innovation, and again, what to do. So as you think of the platform, and I want to touch on something that I think is just amazing. This is before COVID. You as a company were thinking of when new college graduates come in, and I was a banker for 20 years. You go through the normal, orientation, you go through the program, you get, kind of inducted. You thought of a whole new way to bring those people, and that actually has led to some even greater things. Indeed University is a 12-week program. And again, the reason I bring this up is innovation, right? Can you talk about this 12-week program for, again, it started with new college graduates, and it's still there, but has evolved.
Yeah, so the motivator, we started this program 6 years ago, was just that we had reached a point where we used to be hiring, 5 people, 10 people out of school. And one year we hired 50 people at once. And this was, 6 years ago, this was a big deal, and we had to figure out how to onboard them. And the way that we do our work here, right, as I said, we have some of these core principles, and one of them is around innovation. What that really means to us is really experimentation. So innovation, a huge part of this is getting out of our own way. And some of the best ideas that have ever happened in Indeed are ones that the smartest and highest paid people, were totally wrong about. And so what we want to do is we want to create this culture where people are empowered to basically take their own ideas and run with them and have the sort of ownership of trying to deliver results and learning from them. So we created this program that's essentially an incubator. So the new college grads come in, they spend the first week learning enough about the business to just be a little dangerous. And then they get together and they spend a week brainstorming and pitching ideas. And at the end of the week, they pitch those to the executives. And the way that it's set up is that we give our feedback and we offer our skepticism and our experience and whatever, but we have no say in what projects get funded or not. The only requirement for funding is that the new grads can find 3 other people to spend the next 12 weeks working with them. And so that's the currency is time and effort. And then I get a $25,000 marketing budget, and then they do everything. So they're designers, product managers, QA, documentation, customer support, and engineers. They're supposed to build something and get it up and running within the next week. And these are all new apps or new products. So it's not like a new feature. They have to build something standalone They use their marketing budget to get users. They learn this whole process. And at the end of that process, then some of those actually turn into real products, and some of those don't. But in every single one of these cases, they get an experience of really learning what it's like to build and launch something. And so we then went on after a few years of doing that. We've done this now. This is the 7th Indeed University, just started 2 weeks ago. I was just up at 7 o'clock this morning hearing pitches and from the Tokyo and Hyderabad teams. And so we expanded this to the rest of the company. So we have now what we call Indeed Incubator. It's an internal incubator. Once a quarter, anyone in the company can come and pitch ideas to basically a series of executives who are kind of like the fund managers. So we have one person who's our GM for the job seeker team. So he's interested in pitches that are going to do things to help job seekers. Maggie Hulse, who is our GM for the enterprise team, people who are pitching things for big companies, they'll pitch them to Maggie because her investment thesis is we want to help enterprises. And what happens is we go through this pitch process once a quarter. And then if the GM likes the pitch, they fund it. We have a series of rounds from angel to seed to series A, B, and C. And so the angel round is $150,000 in 3 months. And so you get a real budget. We have a team, an incubator team that are engineers, designers, growth marketers, that we can basically, you say how much you're willing to spend and we can staff them up. And then they go and build. And the best thing about this and what we learned from it, what also worked with Indeed U, is that there's an end date on these. So it's like a startup. You get your $150,000 funding, you have 3 months to go and build and prove something. So there's this incredible urgency because everyone knows that they've got to prove something. And then at the end, if they think they found something, they go and they pitch for more funding. And so for us as a business, the hardest thing for bigger businesses to do is shut down things that aren't working. You can fall in love with an idea, or you can think, oh, this person's really great and I just want to give them more time. But if the default is you're done after 3 months or you're done after 6 months and you have to decide to reinvest, it means that to me, the biggest success of that is we've shut down like 95 projects, but we've funded as total over 135. And so we have ones that have gone through multiple years and have been reacquired by the business. We have ones that went for 1.5 years and then figured out that they've learned as much as they could, and those got shut down. But really, it's a system for identifying and nurturing entrepreneurial talent within the business. And we talked about this yesterday. The most exciting thing to me is that 70% of all of the founders of these incubator projects are not from the product and engineering teams, from client-facing teams, from sales, from client success, from HR, from marketing. They're people who have real insight as to what problems are, but had never been in a position before to help develop a product. And it turns out some of them are actually really amazing product thinkers and great strategic thinkers, and they just hadn't had this opportunity before. So some of the fastest growing and most exciting new product at Indeed over the last 3 years is Indeed hiring events. And we can maybe talk about that later. We just launched this big virtual hiring tour across the country. That was an incubator project that was pitched by an employee. And like a lot of them, when it was first pitched, my response was, I've been hearing this pitch for 10 years. It's really like, I looked at the numbers, it's that small a business. It's not that interesting. What works is that this guy who pitched it was so convinced that he was right. You can't manufacture enthusiasm. Right. And if it's someone's idea, and especially if you tell them, it's not really going to work, the amount of being told it's not going to work is actually, the best fuel sometimes. Exactly. And so like when I talked to the incubator teams and the Indeed U teams, I gave the welcome pitch last week, and I said, there's 2 types of projects that are my favorites. The first one is the ones where there's something completely insane that they're trying to do, and they just swing for the fences and they totally miss. And they're the first ones to say, hey, we were totally wrong. And then they pivot and do something else. Like I love when people when they try something, really off the wall and they figure out it's not working and they give up on their own, because you want that intellectual honesty of being able to figure out.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other ones are the ones when I say that it's a terrible idea, it's never going to work, and it turns out to be hugely successful. And those are like the most successful projects we've had in the last 5 years have all been ones that I said were absolutely going to fail. And so the big insight that we have as an organization around innovation is that the greatest enemy to innovation is certainty. That as soon as you're successful, you think you got there because you're smarter than other people. And it's, our founders will be the first to tell you, they had a good idea. It was definitely at the right time. They lucked into the first right 10 people. They made a couple decisions early on that happened to be ones that, and clearly, yes, there's sustained execution, but without a whole bunch of luck, we would not be having this conversation today. Right. And it's the same kind of thing. So we try to figure out, how do you engineer luck? And it's really by betting on people and taking a whole bunch of bites at the table, as opposed to saying, I know for certain this is the thing and we're all going to do that.
Well, and I love that. Let's switch gears to the job seeker side of this, right?
Yeah.
We've talked a lot about the innovation internally, especially around employee engagement and a lot of the ideas that you have, I think a lot of companies out there, small to large, could implement, right? This is really good advice. But on the job seeker side, historic levels of unemployment, disproportionately impacting women, and we'll get to the women because we had a question come in. I want to get to that. But you not only, I want to talk about the virtual hiring tour and your partnership with Goodwill, which is fantastic, but what are you hearing today from job seekers that are on the platform, that are out there looking, that led you to some of these decisions? And in particular, I think, what does that look like for the future of hiring?
So kind of like the discussion around how we talk to our employees, we listen to job seekers. So we're swimming in data. We generate about 60 terabytes of data every single day. And so we have scores and scores of people who are incredibly analytical and data driven. And we've invested a huge amount in our data systems to make sure that everyone has access to all this data. And we also read thousands and thousands of messages from job seekers every single week. And we've been doing that, from the very, very early days, because the data is incredibly helpful, certainly in when we run an experiment to see, did things move in the right direction or the wrong direction? But you can't understand why unless you actually listen to job seekers. So we have an amazing user research team, and we read thousands and thousands of messages. Since the day I started, when we've categorized our NPS feedback, the number one complaint from job seekers has been very consistently in every market around the world. I applied for a job and I didn't hear back. So what we call in the field the black hole problem.
Yeah.
And so that has been one of the big driving forces for everything that we've done. So our business, I mentioned going from, if the mission says we're here to help people get jobs, and we started out with clicks, the product strategy that we laid out a decade ago is just simply stated as get closer to the hire. Mm-hmm. So what can we do? First, help people apply to jobs, then help with assessments. Now our big focus is on interviews. And so all of the things that we've been doing have been around listening to that fact that if a job seeker doesn't hear back, then they don't know where they are in the process. They don't know what's wrong. They don't know how to improve. So if a job seeker applies to 100 jobs and doesn't hear back, they don't know what's wrong. How are they going to get better at it?
Right.
So we've been focused on, so that's the thing that's been driving us towards this interview platform, and we've been building out all these different things along the way. We want to get to the point where that's the ultimate lack of a black hole is, instead of applying to a job and sitting around and waiting, what our interview platform and our hiring events product does is a job seeker applies and basically picks a time slot and gets to show up and interview. And so they go from an RSVP to talking to a human being in as little as 24 hours. And so that's really been, now that has been the number one problem forever. Over the last 6 months, it continues to be the number one problem, except there's this other question of what can I do now?
Right.
I used to work here and this place shut down, or I used to work in a restaurant or a hotel and those jobs are not available. So a big part of that has been also for us being able to go from search, where job seekers are telling us what they're interested in, to using all of that data and our insights to push jobs to people. It seems obvious, and we've been sending job alerts and things like that for forever, but really being able to understand how to tell people, here's, given your experience, what we know from your resume, but more importantly, what you've been searching for in the jobs that you've been applying for, here's things that you are qualified for that you can interview for today. And that's what we've been trying to do. So this I'll just give the quick plug. The virtual hiring tour we just launched on Monday, and we're over the next 6 weeks we're doing 4 week-long region-wide events. We're in the West right now. We'll be in the South, then the Midwest, and the Northeast. We have about 700 employers already signed up. We expect to have more than 1,000 by the time it's done. Our goal is to get 20,000 people hired in the next 6 weeks that we'll be able to precisely measure. We've had 80,000 job seeker RSVPs just for this week. And we're hosting tens of thousands of interviews over the course of the week. And most of these are positions where people will be able to hear back within a day or so if they're moving on to the next round, or in many cases, there are offers being made on the spot. And the jobs range from, there's restaurant worker jobs, there's math teacher jobs, there's chemist jobs. Lowe's is hiring a VP of customer service, and they're interviewing tomorrow on the platform for this job. And they've got a full slate of 30 people that they're going to be interviewing. And so it's really, hopefully, something where there's opportunity for almost everyone.
And so, there's this myth, right, that job sites, and I'm sure you hear this, it's all the low-level jobs. It's again, I apply and I don't hear back at the black hole. But that's a myth, right? I mean, it really depends on what the company needs. And then obviously the skills that the job seekers have. But this, and one of the questions that came in from, and I apologize if I mess up the name, but Yana Goodnigen said, question for Chris, and I kind of alluded to the woman problem, right? Because we know it's disreport. What does Indeed do in terms of jobs for women? Is there any specific initiative around women? Again, pre-COVID, now COVID, whatever, but around women getting hired?
Yeah, so we're broadly focused. So in those core values that I talked about, inclusion and belonging is the fifth and the most sort of foundational of those. And for us, for all the reasons that other companies focus on that, those are all there. It's, more innovation, better customer orientation, access to talent, all of those reasons. But for us, because of the mission, we feel like it's an absolute necessity. When we look at the outcome of the decisions that we make about our products and the impact that they have, when you look at any underrepresented group, and whether it's gender identity, ethnicity, disability, any of those things, where those differences play out, it's healthcare, it's housing, and jobs, and the criminal justice system, obviously. But when it comes to jobs, so we have, for us, the inclusion and belonging work is directly tied to how do we make for more inclusive hiring. And there's a handful of different initiatives that we have. So when we look at something like Indeed Assessment, so we acquired a company a couple of years ago that had built an assessments platform where instead of just judging a job seeker by their resume, that they could actually and there's like 150 different assessments across multiple different skill sets and industries. You just get an empirical measure of what a job seeker is capable of, which is very different than what they've done. We know that there's huge discrepancies in terms of what opportunities people have and what their resumes may look like. We also know there's incredible bias in the hiring process. And so there's all the studies that I'm sure everyone is familiar with. The most famous one being the one that was done about 15 years ago, where they just took the same 2 resumes with the names Emily and Greg and Lakeisha and Jamal. And Lakeisha and Jamal had to send out 50% more resumes than Emily and Greg to get a call back. You get the same difference on gender, you get the same difference on neighbor, all of these things. So for us, working towards actually eliminating resumes entirely and going towards something that's more empirical, like an assessment, or what we're doing here, the interview platform for us, there's a huge, we can't eliminate bigotry and bias in individual, but we can help eliminate steps where those things show up. So there's a huge set of evidence that just reviewing the resume, a woman or a person of color or a person from another country with a different sounding name is less likely to make it through that. So with this interview platform, there's no resume. People just, we have done the minimum verification that someone meets the qualifications that they're looking for to interview, and then we take you directly to the interview. Now, we'd love to be able to go beyond that and help reduce bias on the employer
Sure.
when making decisions. But if you can eliminate those steps, so that's a huge area of focus. And then we have another big area of focus around just bias and ethics in algorithms. So our matching algorithms and how we do that work to identify what the best jobs to recommend for a job seeker are. We have a team of a diverse team of very smart people who are looking at right now the obligation that we have to take all of that with an incredible amount of seriousness. So that it's really like a fundamental focus across all of our products and how we're thinking about it and how we can offer debiasing in the products as well, where our resume product is going to soon have an option for employers to turn off the names so they can just look at resumes without looking at names. So we don't have a specific product to just help employers only hire women. That's actually highly regulated in the US. And so all the things that we want to work on and improve are also things where there's a whole lot of laws around. So, but we do know that employers are more and more interested in hiring diversity across all these different dimensions. So we're trying to meet that in as many ways as we can.
Yeah, and if you remove a layer of that bias, it only helps, right? Again, as someone who came from a very male-dominated world in the world of finance, right, it was hard to do that. I think this idea of virtual hiring, right, or virtual interviewing, or video interviewing. I mean, if you work in a global organization, you're normally used to telepresence or a lot of phone calls and conference calls, but this is a new world where everybody is pretty virtual. In our conversation, you said there's been 1,000% increase in interest in video interviews. When you talk about video, can you talk a little bit about this? Because this is the way of the future, right? It used to be, Chris, I'm gonna fly to Austin and I'm gonna interview with you because I'm up for this big job. There was this whole, again, this bias around, I've got to meet that person and feel them. That's changing because we realize the technology has made us more efficient. But when you saw that 1,000% increase, what does that tell you?
Yeah, so this is one of those things, you talk about a secular shift. We went from talking to employers who told us consistently for years, I need to sit across the table from someone to really judge who they are. And then in March, that stopped for a whole lot of people. Mm-hmm. And so out of necessity, so we have a feature just in our small business hosting platform where people can post jobs. They can take a candidate they like and send them an interview request. And very consistently for years and years, about 1% of those interviews were for a video interview versus a phone or a face-to-face. And overnight, it actually jumped up to about 15%. So it was like a 1,400% increase. And also the number of phone interviews jumped up. But what happened was over the last few months, as people started kind of opening things up, the phone interviews went back down to the levels that they were before, but the video interviews have stayed exactly the same. And so what we've seen in talking to people is that the people tried it, found out that it actually is convenient. They can do 4 interviews back to back without having to run from room to room. You don't have to bring a candidate in for a first round, which is a lot of overhead if you're just gonna, send them home afterwards. So people have found that it's actually really convenient in the same way that for, I know my parents are on Zoom now and they were not on Zoom before all this, and they're happy talking to the grandkids. And so there will be, again, people are going to go back to offices. People will be face-to-face again. But this is a new thing that the last 6 months have just dramatically accelerated adoption of. And so we think that the future of hiring is going to have a lot more virtual. We certainly think that first round interviews, it really doesn't make sense to bring someone, in and make them find parking and do all that kind of stuff for a first round interview. So we're really trying to transform that first. And we think that the future of work is going to have a similar component. Now, going back to the previous conversation, the one thing that we're really mindful of is that the vast disparities that exist certainly in this country are going to become intensified by this. So if you look at the Bureau of Labor Statistics has done a couple of surveys recently, and when they look at by job category, the percentage of jobs that are remote capable, the difference between someone who has who does not have a high school degree,
right,
on average in the US, less than 10% of them can work remotely, where if you have a bachelor's degree, more than 67% can. For the difference between white workers and black workers is somewhere between 20 to 60% greater. And it's even greater for the difference between white and Latinx workers, just in terms of the categories of jobs that they happen in the US to be in and how many of those are remote capable. There's a lot more people who are working in the service sector who have lower levels of education and who are more likely to be people of color. Interestingly, women and men in that survey, there's a slightly higher percentage of women in the US who are in remote capable fields. So that's like an interesting different. It was actually like 3 or 4 percentage points different. So you'd have to dig into it to understand what that is. But that's something that we're really mindful of, that while it's really easy for us who are all sitting here on our Zooms and clearly doing work that can be done this way, that's not going to be evenly distributed. And that's something that there's going to be a huge amount of mindfulness that's going to have to go into how that future unfolds in a way that doesn't decrease disparity, and that where equity and inclusion are really going to be the next frontier.
Absolutely. I know we only have a couple minutes. There's another question that I wanted to get to from an attendee who's also happens to be a later panelist and moderator, from Gina Hadley, who is the co-founder and of an extraordinary platform for women called The Second Shift. Do companies that innovate in hiring indicate how innovative companies are with their full-time employees? So I think I know what she's saying, so maybe I could break it down since I know what so The Second Shift is an amazing platform, particularly for women that have 10, 15 years of experience and more, that really don't want to work a 60-hour work week anymore. And so The Second Shift was really at the forefront of thinking about remote work, flexibility, contractor, project-based. And there are a lot of companies out there that say, I need full-time, I need full-time, I need full-time, right? I don't want to have a project, I don't want to have a contractor. And so now we're all in this where we're flexible work because we're all at home. Is there a measure or an indicator that a company that's really progressive in thinking about innovation and flexibility actually may be a more successful company with their staff?
That's a great question. So I don't have an empirical answer to that. I can say that when we have looked at this, so we've taken the opportunity with what's going on right now and just look through the lens of how can we provide the most flexibility for our employees. And so part of that is just right now because people need a lot more flexibility. And every decision that we've made around giving people time off and offering, we had been a 0 part-time work business up until 6 months ago, and we started offering part-time options, and being able to accommodate to that. We also, as I said, are a very data-driven organization. So we've been measuring, let's take the product and engineering teams, a whole bunch of metrics around efficiency for the last several years, just trying to increase efficiency. How long does it take for the average idea to go from something that's committed to appearing on the site and live? And in our sales teams, we're measuring all these kinds of efficiency. The first 3 months of working from home, efficiency was pretty much the same, if not greater than it was before. And we had a lot of managers who were terrified of the idea of letting people work remotely or set their own schedules. And it was really amazing. Then we saw, I think, a little bit of a dip at one point when we figured out that people were really good at doing the work that had been planned before, but we weren't as good at planning the next set of work. So then we figured out how to make that work. So we've certainly seen, and we're about to roll out in a couple of weeks what our future workforce plans look like. And I can't announce the details because we haven't told the company yet, but there's a lot more flexibility. There's a lot more flexibility for a huge percentage of the company. So we certainly believe that that's something that will be a lot better. I'd be really interested to see if there is empirical research on that about other companies, and I would love to hear if our panelist has any specific insight.
Well, I will definitely connect you two. We work with The Second Shift at Luminary, and she happens to be a member as well. So I would love to. I think there's a lot more. So that'll be my to-do. There's a bunch of questions, and we only have about 2 minutes left, but I'm going to try to get to one last one. So Helene Purcell wrote, have you seen an increasing labor demand shortage given the pandemic? In other words, are individuals searching for jobs more while employers have pulled back on hiring?
So it's been really interesting. We've been paying very close attention to that. It's different sector by sector. In the US, because of the stimulus, we actually didn't see a huge jump in people looking for jobs right away. And it has picked up in the last few months. So there's a period of time where people's unemployment benefits were actually better than what they were making, which is just a testament to the problems that we have with minimum wage in the US and other things like that. It's different in different markets around the world. Right now, because in the US, there was a huge amount of people who lost their jobs immediately. Now there's a bunch of companies during the recovery who are rehiring, where like in Japan, people didn't lose their jobs. So there's not a whole lot of rehiring. So there's a lot of people who are looking right now, but it took a few months. The first few months, we expected to see a lot of job seeker activity and not a lot of jobs, and we didn't see it. And now we're seeing a rise in jobs and a rise in people looking for jobs. But the one thing that we have seen that I can say empirically is that people who are employed are much less likely to be looking. So it used to be on Indeed that you have unemployed people looking, but the vast majority of our traffic was always people who were just looking for a better job. People are much more reluctant to jump right now because of all the uncertainty.
And in that kind of same vein, I'll add, do you think that if we said yesterday we're not going to get into politics, but if a new stimulus has ever come to some agreement, which will likely happen on November 3rd, what do you think that'll flip-flop back if people then now get the checks again?
Yeah, I mean, I think it is likely to have an impact. Right now, the interesting thing is that there's a ton of jobs right now. We kind of talked about this, that are not the same jobs that people had before. So
right.
Even though there's a lot of unemployed people, employers are having to work to attract talent because they're trying to get people to try something they haven't done. So even though the labor market is sort of upside down, we still have a lot of people trying to hire for roles, and there are fewer people looking for those roles. So people are, it's an interesting labor market right now. We want people to be employed, and we're really happy if people are employed and they don't need to come to Indeed to look for a job. That, obviously we care about people having gainful employment, but right now we're seeing a lot of activity from employers because they are trying to fill these roles that are not the ones that people had been looking for before.
Well, Chris, we'll make sure that we get all the information, especially around the virtual hiring tour, in the chat. Looking forward to all the upcoming news. And I'll turn it back to Juliet in a moment. My last personal question was, what was the name of your band?
The last band I played in was with a really amazing singer-songwriter named Eleni Mandel. She's still out there. You can Google her. We were Eleni Mandel and the Waffle Brothers. So that was
Waffle Brothers, as in waffles.
I was a waffle brother. That was back in 1992. So
we will have to YouTube that. But Chris, thank you so much. Look forward to staying in touch, and good luck with the hiring tour.
Okay, thank you so much, and thanks for everyone for joining us today.
Thanks, Juliet and the Worth team.
Thank you so much, Chris, and thanks to Kate for moderating. Chris, I think the growth that Indeed has seen over the past 10 years is extraordinary, and congratulations on that. And I think the culture and innovation of Indeed is testament to your and the team's leadership. So thanks again. I remember yesterday you mentioned the values that you live by at Indeed, which I think was it innovate and ownership? Or what were the two words that you used?
Innovation and autonomy. Yeah, those are among those values there. Yes.
Yeah, which I love. And also, Kate mentioned Gina Hadley. We are going to be doing a session on the transformation of work, which Gina is moderating the session after this. So if you're able to stick around, please do. But thanks again for being a brilliant speaker. And thank you for being a partner. I did want to share, if you're looking for career advice, to check out Indeed's career guide, and also they have a wonderful platform, Lead with Indeed, which we'll share, which has some great resources for people seeking jobs, but also for leadership as well. So thank you for that, Chris.
Julia, thanks so much for having me.
All right.
Take care.
Have a good day. Thank you. Next up, we are talking about why women are the key to the UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this is moderated by Alison Gross, who is also a Worth contributor. And we're thrilled to be joined by Bettina Schala, Director, Group Public Affairs at Adecco Group, and also Dr. Lilian Ajayi-Ore, who's the CEO and founder of Global Connections for Women Foundation. So welcome everyone. Alison, I'm going to turn it over to you if you're there.
Hello.
Hello.
Greetings.
Hi there. And I'm just waiting for Alison. Alison, you're there, I think. We just need your camera and your unmute.
I must look a bit.
There you are.
I am.
Hi.
There we go. Hello, everybody.
Hello.
How have you enjoyed the last few sessions, Alison?
Terrific. Really interesting, particularly the last one with Chris from Indeed. Really great to get different perspectives and to see what everybody else is doing. It's been a great afternoon, so thank you.
Thank you. And I'll turn it over to you now. And thank you, Lilian and Bettina, for joining us as well. It's great to see you.
Thanks for having us. Thanks for having us.
Thank you, and thank you all very much. So yes, this is why are women the key to the Sustainable Development Goals. Some quick housekeeping. I will be taking questions in the chat, so please use the chat bar. I'll also put up the contact information for myself and Bettina and Lilian, so that if anyone wants to contact us afterwards, you can do that through LinkedIn. So thank you very much. I will give you a little bit of background first for those of you who aren't so familiar with the Sustainable Development Goals. These were created by the United Nations, and it distilled down the global issues into 17 goals. And two pivotal aspects that we look at when we see these goals, the first one is gender equality. This goal really is a fundamental requirement of equality and empowerment for women, which feeds into all the other goals. And the other pivotal one is partnerships. Nothing can be achieved without a coordinated global approach. And the next steps for the further development of these partnerships for the Sustainable Development Goals is going to be this agenda for implementation. Women are the drivers of change in their families, in the communities, in our communities, and indeed for nations. If we don't invest in the lives and in the futures of women, we can't assume that the Sustainable Development Goals are going to succeed. So before we dive in and we get into some questions, let me begin by turning over to my two guests here and ask them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit more about themselves. And Bettina, if you will, if you could introduce yourself, and I think we can all see it's a little bit darker where you are. So may I please just let everybody know, thank you, Bettina, because where you are, it's rather late in the evening, so over to you.
Thank you so much, Alison. And indeed, this is Zurich calling. So I have connected to the summit out of Switzerland in the center of Europe. And indeed, you know, I connected when the summit started around 2 hours ago when it was 8 o'clock. There was still sunshine here. Since then, night has fallen and I've tried just about every lighting option. I'm afraid this is what I came up with. So I hope I'm not a ghost speaking to you from the dark. I'm definitely speaking to you from Switzerland. Delighted to be with you. I am with the Adecco Group, the world's largest provider of HR solutions, which is headquartered in Switzerland. But as a matter of fact, operates in 60 countries, amongst them in the United States as well. And our daily business, in a way, is talent. So looking at all aspects of jobs, and of course, I tremendously enjoyed Kate's and Chris's conversation just now, this is exactly our field. Now, a little trivia about me and why I was so delighted to be part of this conversation is that during my studies, I actually joined a student group that was active for Switzerland's membership to the United Nations. In the late 90s, Switzerland, this small little country of 8 million people in the middle of Europe, a neutral country, was not a member of the UN. And I was part of those people who said that cannot be true. We are one of the embodiments of cooperation as a country and of solidarity. It's also a rich country, so it's important to contribute. So I've joined this team, and together we managed to push a referendum in Switzerland and to have Switzerland join the United Nations. And I was part of the delegation when the Swiss government and Switzerland was accepted at the United Nations headquarters in New York. So delighted to be here and to be sharing just a few insights from my perspective on this topic.
Thank you. And Lillian, please, if you could tell us a little more about yourself and your background.
Sure. So good evening, everyone. Again, thank you so much for the opportunity to join you this afternoon or this evening, depending on where you are in the world. My name is Dr. Lillian Ajayi-Ora, and I'm the founder and executive director for GC4Women, which is GC4 Global Connection for Women Foundation. So the mission of the organization is to connect, educate, and empower women and girls in different parts of the world. And our focus, and we'll talk deeper about this later on in discussion, but our focus in the recent years, I think in the last 3 years, has been on entrepreneurship, really arming female entrepreneurs with the skills that they need, with the competencies that they need, with the support that they need, and even with the connections and the introduction that they need. And very similar to Bertina, I did come from a United Nations background. Upon finishing college, I worked at the UN for the mission of Nigeria to the UN, and I was part of the third delegation. And my job was policy negotiation. So I worked on policies on debt cancellation on behalf of Nigeria and the continent, Africa. And for me, when I left, I've always kind of felt that I needed to contribute in a way that kind of catered towards women and girls in different parts. And so, before we had the Sustainable Development Goals, we had the MDG goals, which was the Millennium Development Goals. And I've been closely watching the progress that we've made. And I'm really, really excited to talk about what we're discussing today, which is, how do we power forward and what particular things the women still need, and to talk about the disparity that still exists, granted that we have COVID crisis, a pandemic that we're all facing, and how much impact it's having on females, especially entrepreneurs. So I'm excited. Thank you, Allison.
Right, absolutely. Yes, I'm looking forward to hearing some more about the work that you're doing. I'd like to begin, and knowing that Bettina is doing a number of things with government relations for Adecco, let's begin at the top and work our way down. Let's talk about women government leaders. And as we look at the world today, we look at government leaders and how they've fared in handling the pandemic, we've seen that COVID-19 outcomes have been, in some cases, better in countries that were led by women. And one explanation that we've read about for why women leaders have done better is that these leaders have got different attitudes to risk. We found that women in leadership, in government leadership roles, were more risk averse than men regarding human life, but they were less risk averse than men with their economies. Now, as a government affairs person, Bettina, can you give us your perspective on the fact that COVID-19 outcomes have been so different and better led by women?
I think this is one of the most interesting questions for anybody working in government affairs and actually in politics. And, as I said, I've joined this summit and I've been listening in, and there's been a few representatives, fantastic women working in notably the American political environment. Now, the COVID-19 crisis, since we're unfortunately still in it, we're only starting, to do the studies to see the results. But there's indeed one study that the University of Liverpool published this summer, which looked at the first quarter of the crisis, and which confirms exactly what you've said, which is that indeed those countries that are led by women seem to have fared the most. You said it. One argument is the risk approach. And actually, in all of those countries, it was said that decisions were made much quicker and in a more decisive way, which was at that first instance when the crisis hit, absolutely key. But then what the study also says, and what we've been seeing again from the government affairs perspective, is that what is absolutely needed now is consultation, it's collaboration, but it's also connected thinking. And you will see, I'm one of those people who will say that this is definitely one of the core attributes that women bring to the table. As it is, it's something we're going to be tracking very closely. I wanted to point out that there's an organization called Women Political Leaders that is bringing together mayor women from around the world, country leaders from around the world, parliamentarians from around the world. And they are in the process of digging into this issue again. And of course, we're super interested to see what they're going to say about those countries that are being led by women. And let me finish, I cannot resist, by naming those countries. Interestingly, some of them quite small and in Europe. So we've got Iceland, Finland, and Denmark. But then we've got major economies, of course, like Germany, led by Chancellor Angela Merkel. We've got fascinating countries like New Zealand, really fascinating, where Jacinda Ardern, of course, since she's an island as well, has applied very interesting policies that are going to help all of us. And then, interestingly, in Asia, we have Taiwan. So in summary, I'm one of those that will immediately underline that in times of crisis, and there is no crisis bigger, it seems, than this one that just hit us, women seem to bring the attributes to the table to handle the crisis for the benefit of the economy and of the people.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. Lillian, as we talk about collaboration and the work that you've seen and that you're doing with female entrepreneurs, can you give us your perspective on where you see the big differences, whether it's now, what's happening in the world with COVID-19, or planning for the post-COVID world? What sort of things are you working on?
Yes, so great question. I think it's also an important conversation to have around, how do we keep our entrepreneurs, especially female entrepreneurs, motivated? So when you look at the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly when it comes to that gender equality and how we can successfully measure that and create opportunities for women, entrepreneurship has become the way that women are able to find some kind of economic sustainability for themselves. And so, there was a report written by McKinsey that looked at, just around the globe, different ethnicity group in America, and of course, outside of the US, how much impact the crisis has had on entrepreneurs, particularly female entrepreneurs. So according to statistics, in United States alone, a lot of the businesses, some small business owners kind of lost 22% of their business because of the crisis. And when you look deeper in the data, 41% of that overall score was actually impacted by women-owned businesses. And then when you kind of dig deeper, you start to see what data shows you in terms of ethnicity groups that are suffering. And we see that the minority groups have the strongest pain point. In terms of us and what we've done with GC4W, we created the GC4W University, where we're giving entrepreneurs, female entrepreneurs in different levels of their business. You have to be at least 1 year into your business for sure, because we want to make sure that it's not a hobby. It's really something that you're serious about and you're pursuing. And so one of the things that we've noticed, because we actually held a class during the crisis, we had our first session in July, which was was even inspired by our female founders who wanted to get the training. And so one of the things that we saw that most of our students lack in the beginning was confidence, and whether or not they can stay on and continue with this endeavor. Because as you know, there's a need for, the leader herself has to believe in her ability to carry out the business plans. And then the second thing is, are people going to buy into my business because it's not essential? So there's that, conversation with the founder and her team about whether or not they can afford to even stay alive. And then there's also the lack of funding that they face, because now companies are kind of seasoned, and we see from reports that you read about VCs and how they invest, VCs suspended their new investment. They only focus on existing portfolios, so companies that they've already invested in. So that also kind of disincorporated, it kind of, distance our female entrepreneurs from even getting new funding, especially in a time like this. So what we've done is, we use this time, this quiet downtime, to create a pitch program. So our students, when they're done with the 5-day training, they can now go into this workshop where we really prepare their pitches, prepare them to give really strong pitches. But our biggest, my biggest concern is that even as we prepare them, there is a concern in me that's saying that what environment are they walking into when, things are still kind of slow and kind of held on. And I think, we've also seen in literature and recent research that, I think we'll be slower at achieving the Sustainable Development Goals because of the COVID crisis. And I think the only way that we can ensure that at least we continue to maintain some kind of growth and expansion is by us individually and through corporation making a conscious effort to support small businesses, especially female entrepreneurs who are greatly impacted by this. The other thing I want to end with is when you look at the data for small business owners that are run by female, 85% of the employees had to be let go because they couldn't afford to keep them. And that is a concern of survival. That's a concern for economic development, economic growth. So I think we don't want to see a reversal, but we need to consider more actions, more policies, more funding, more support. And I don't know who has the answer to that, but that's the concern that my female entrepreneurs share.
Let me ask you a follow-up on that, Lillian. So you bring up a really serious concern about funding and job loss for women. One of the things that came out of a report called Women Rising 2030 is that the SDGs, the Sustainable Development Goals themselves, should be able to unlock. They came up with a number of 380 million jobs linked to sustainable jobs, sustainable development jobs by 2030. Is that looking at the future? Is that an aspect that your foundation is looking at? Is there a pivot or an advisory piece to women entrepreneurs to look at the SDGs and look at a possible alignment? And is that going to be helpful in transitioning from areas that might not get funding or that might be having difficulty going forward?
Yeah, and I mean, it's a great question. I mean, I read a report recently that talked about funding towards SDG has actually went down. So they went from a $31 billion investment to now $5 billion investment because of, commitment loss that they've gotten because of all the different impact that companies have faced in the recent months. For us, it's more of like ensuring that these women, these female entrepreneurs kind of hold still and know that, we try to express to them that you're not the only one feeling the impact of the pandemic. But at the same time, is there anything that you can pivot? Is there a way to transform your business and do one? And one example is even with GC4W being a charity organization, like we're the ones kind of helping them power forward, and vice versa. We have to think about ways to reinvent ourselves. And one of the first things that we did was we felt that, if we had a tremendous amount of traffic in terms of people who come to the website to visit, to read content, to participate in our programs, is there a way to kind of get those individuals who are on our website to kind of patronize these women who have tangible products that they can sell? So we created the shop.gc4women.org shopping page, which is like the GC4W marketplace, so that our female entrepreneurs can potentially sell their products on our website, and people who are looking, because I think society through the BML movement, everyone is trying to make conscious decision about their actions. And I think that essentially will help kind of subvert any of the impact that the projections are making. But I honestly think that that analysis, the question that you asked, it's going to be slowed down a bit because, you know, there's been a drought in funding because organizations' commitment cannot be fulfilled because of the impact of financials in their own organizations. So we are just kind of teaching our entrepreneurs on how to reinvent themselves, how to pivot, how to look beyond just what they kind of started out and see if there's any other things that they can pick up to increase profitability.
Right, and Bettina, from the large business perspective and the labor market, we know that women have been hit disproportionately hard by COVID. Do you have something to add of what big business is doing and where you see help coming from companies like where you are?
No, absolutely. And it's interesting. We ran a survey at the Adecco Group, published the results about a month ago. And one of the outcomes was that actually, compared to before, people trusted employers more than before in bringing a solution to the table and obviously in mitigating the crisis. So coming out of years of more mistrust against the big employers, it seems that in this situation, this has changed a little bit. And all the peers we're talking to, and definitely the clients we're interacting with, it's all about, first of all, well, keeping people in employment. And Chris, of course, alluded to the support measures by governments. We've seen that all around the world. In Europe, for instance, 60 million people got support with short-time work. And there, we're starting to see the numbers, obviously for women as well. This was and is still an incredibly important instrument. But the key as it is to really ensure that women access jobs, right? This is something which the UN has identified, we've been working on. It's a topic for every type of and form of work. If we're looking from the big employer perspective, it's this access, it's making sure that the policies by employers will, in the recruitment, in the hiring process already, favor and encourage women to come on. And it was mentioned before as well, there's ways of doing that, you know, in the ways how you describe a job opening, in the words that you use, in obviously very often, Chris mentioned it as well, taking away anything that could lead to biases, etc. So employers need to go back, and if they're not doing it, they need to introduce these type of measures now. And then for those who are in employment, there the fight goes on, if I may say, as it was before. I think there's two big topics that we always bring up. One is the pay topic that has to be addressed more than ever now. And the other one is actually the whole behavior, the value of obviously a woman or just any inclusive person at any big employer, small employer, etc. But the big employers now have this responsibility to step it up. Lastly, I wanted to mention there's one measure that that we are seeing that should make a difference. That is succession planning. Where we're calling employers to include always women in what is that succession planning. So that was true already before, but again now needs to be part of policies that are being considered at that level.
Thank you. There is so much more to talk about. We are out of time. I would love to continue this. As I said at the beginning, I've put our information up with our LinkedIn points of contact. I hope that everyone in the audience will join me in thanking Bettina and Lilian. And of course, Worth and the Women at Worth team has done a fantastic job. I will turn it back over to the team and let's keep this conversation going forward afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all so much. That was such an important, insightful conversation. And Bettina, Lillian, and Alison, thank you for all that you're doing in this area. Bettina, thank you for joining at such a late hour where you are in Europe. And it was also great that you touched on some of the solutions, and it was a very good segue into our next session, which is around the transformation of work. And I think we just talked about driving access for women into the workforce, and we're joined by Gina Hadley, who's the co-founder of The Second Shift, Dr. Angela Jackson, who's partner at New Profit, and Dee Poku-Spalding, founder and CEO of We Network. So delighted to have you all there. And Gina, I will hand it over.
Thank you, Juliet. I'm waiting for Dee and Angela to join. There's Angela and there's Dee. Hi, girls. I come to you live from my son's bedroom because it is the best Wi-Fi in the house. I'm super excited to continue our conversation. We were able to chat this week. And I think it's amazing that we're able to follow the conversation that Chris and Kate were having, and then the extraordinary panel talking about the UN's goals. I'm just going to take a moment to introduce our panelists. Dr. Angela Jackson leads New Profit's Future of Work initiative, which seeks to close career readiness gap for Americans from low-income backgrounds. Angela's career started in the private sector, leading business development for organizations like Viacom and Nokia. While working internationally, she began to wonder, if multinational companies could deliver their products consistently and act with quality at scale, what would it take to deliver social innovations like education and health in a similar manner? That could be like a whole nother panel, considering no one's back in school right now. Dee is the founder of the newly launched We Suite, congratulations, a membership network and platform for women leaders and creators. In addition to providing, and I have to say, I have been able to be at some of your sessions, and they were extraordinary. In addition to providing its members with the community and tools to succeed in the workplace, the We Suite supports brands and corporations with their culture building and diversity initiatives. Over the years, Dee has attracted numerous business and cultural leaders, small names like Queen Raina and Melinda Gates and Christy Turlington, as well as many, many others. I'm Gina Hadley. I'm the co-founder of The Second Shift, a marketplace that connects a vetted membership of professional women who work flexibly with companies to solve their most pressing issues. And as you can imagine, the transformation of the workplace is an obsession of ours at The Second Shift. So I am beyond excited to talk with both of you and get your insights on what we can do to change it for the good for all of us. I wanted to also say that the questions are there. I will keep them open. Please, I would love to get some input from the audience, and I'll monitor that, ladies, so that you don't have to. First, I wanted to ask both of you, and Angela, I'll start with you. How has this seismic shift affected the communities that you serve? And what does the transformation of the workplace actually mean to you? So I'm going to leave you with that small question.
It's that small question, right? So as you shared, when I lead the future of work at New Profit, we're a philanthropy. We've been around for 20 years investing in complex social problems. As it relates to the future of work, when I joined 2 years ago, it was really about upmarket solutions. Like, how do we take middle skill workers and really get them prepared for higher level jobs? When we looked at the pandemic and when it hit in March, what we saw was this new designation of essential workers. And as we shared yesterday, these are people who never signed up to be essential workers, right? All the things that we thought we couldn't do in work, like work remotes, give special benefits to mothers, parents, right? Giving cost and money for equipment and home equipment, all of that happened. And I think what we saw when we're sheltered all in place at the same time is that we all had a shared lived reality of being like impacted by this pandemic, and really had to think about the lived realities of others, right? So like if your babysitter couldn't get in because of the pandemic, you were deeply affected. It doesn't matter how much you make it work, right? And I think when we think about the future of work now, really thinking about a future of work that's more empathetic, that's more worker-centered, and really centering on the lived realities of people who work. I mean, when we think about COVID, the workforce didn't work for a majority of people, right? You got 40% of Americans who couldn't take a $400 shock. So let's say their car broke down, they couldn't get a babysitter. You had, working mothers who were just trying to figure it out, afraid to ask for a day off, caring for elderly parents, etc. What we're seeing now is those are like non-negotiables. Those are just part of making kind of a humane workplace. And my hope is that the future of work will really encompass the lived realities of people in a more humane way.
Sorry, I had muted myself there for a sec. Dee, I'm going to pose the same question to you. How has this seismic moment that we're having affected the communities you serve, and what does transformation in the workplace mean to you?
Sure. So, I serve a community of women leaders and creators, so a mix of founders and executives who have senior level positions at corporations. And so certainly the rug was pulled out from under women, and particularly so for mothers who suddenly had to juggle and sort of renegotiate their lives in a different way. I would say that, it presents both challenges and opportunities. So, for example, if you are an executive right now, how do you network? How do you form new relationships? How do you build your career through the network of sort of people you build around you if you are not in a physical space, if you are not going into the office, if you are not going to industry events? And so suddenly my company and my business, where I actually sort of slightly panicked when the work from home order came into effect, because I thought, my business was actually anchored around sort of physical, sort of in-person connection. And suddenly, we were in this sort of digital world. But actually what I saw for my women was that they were pulling together more than ever. One, to sort of continue to sort of build and deepen relationships, but also to draw on the community for ideas and support. So whether it was workplace related issues they were trying to solve for, or whether it was just sort of, navigating things personally as women, as mothers, they were really sort of drawing on the experiences of my members just to solve for that. And because we were all in this together, like it was a brand new situation for everybody, it was really about like, how are you doing it? How are you navigating this? And so I loved that sense of, really sort of pulling together and being one community. I think for founders, it's a very interesting time because, again, we're in this sort of new next normal, whatever we're calling it. And it's presented challenges that, could present opportunities for founders. Like, how do we solve for the issues that this remote lifestyle has presented? So, for example, I used to struggle, particularly at the height of the pandemic, to order groceries. Like, I just couldn't, everyone sort of ordered everything that was in the stores, but also there were no drivers, essential workers who were being sort of like overextended. And so it was impossible to do very simple things. And so I think it presents certainly an opportunity as well for women and for founders to really look at the pain points that were revealed and how they can solve for those.
For both of you, community and empathy are part of how you see us changing for good. Angela, when you look at the founders and well, first of all, before I go on, I need to ask you, and I meant to ask you this when we spoke the other day. Can you talk to us about New Profits Brand Challenge? Because that will bring us to the next point in the conversation. I'm so curious to hear what that is and what that entails.
Yeah, absolutely. So we launched in June the Future of Work Grand Challenge, and really the spirit behind that is thinking about how do we at scale prepare people for the future of work and really prepare people who may not have had opportunities for formal learning, who may not have gone back to get an advanced degree. How do they learn and prepare for the future while they're doing their real and actual lives, where they're raising families and while they're currently working? So we launched this $6 million challenge for innovators to think of ways via distance using technology that they could rapidly upskill, that people could rapidly upskill for less time and less cost. And we're also providing wraparound supports. What happened is we planned on, I've been working on this for 2 years, and then COVID hit. We planned to launch the initiative in November, and we actually pushed up into June of this year because we really felt like we had some solutions that could help in this moment. And it's really helping in two ways. One is we're funding entrepreneurs who are working on accelerated learning programs, who are working on platforms like Dee mentioned to connect people using technology. You know, I'm in Boston. That doesn't mean that I don't want to network with someone who's in New York. And with technology, we can do that. So we're going to fund innovators $6 million, for-profit and nonprofit innovators who actually come up with ideas to train people and to just make those connections. The second piece of it is we thought it was important to take this technology to where people are. So we're not waiting for people to find these innovators. We're partnering with workforce boards and job centers and communities throughout the United States, where we're actually going to take this technology to communities and test it with actual workers. And that's the beauty of working with the X Prize Foundation, one of our partners. They use the wisdom of the crowd to think about how can we surface the best and brightest innovations and minds, and how do we put it to work against like the world's hardest and most critical problems.
I will be, please keep us updated on how we can learn more about that. I'm so curious as to learn what some of these innovations are, because I think that we can all agree, and we had this conversation yesterday, and then Dee, and then I'm going to come back to you around this community and empathy question, and this leads into it. We had the conversation that we see companies taking on the role that historically government did, where companies have become the social safety net for their employees. How do you feel that large companies and innovators alike can take on these roles in order to help, whether a small company or large, whether an entrepreneur or somebody who's starting a new venture, maybe somebody who's funding new companies, to make sure that we're building organizations that will take care of their employees, which will then lead us to this transformation of the workplace, which feels more inclusive for all?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a very interesting time for companies. There's a report that Edelman put out every year called the Trust Barometer, which has shown that, you know, so over time, increasingly customers or the public have more faith in brands, in the brands that they buy from, than they do in governments who really solve social issues, which is disturbing in of itself. And I think that, you know, obviously there are brands who genuinely care, and there are brands who are focused on the bottom line, but, you know, whatever their reasons, they have a customer base who care about these issues, who were, you know, certainly triggered by Black Lives Matter, were triggered by the, you know, the additional pressure that was put on essential workers during this time, and who are demanding more from the brands they buy from. And so I think that any brand that, you know, wants to sort of survive this period and into the future has to really think about, one, its internal structures. What does their workforce look like? How representative is their workforce? What does their senior leadership look like? And you know, and how is it representing the sort of population at large? What are their boards look like? And then sort of, you know, it's about pipelines and supply diversity. It's about, you know, what they're selling and their processes. And so I think, you know, it's a sort of ground up overhaul for companies who want to, you know, be around for the foreseeable future. In terms of what they can do, I think that, you know, there are those sort of internal fixes that I think every brand has to look at first. Like, you know, what do we represent on the inside? And then it's really thinking about these issues going forward, and how do we prepare how do they prepare their employees for this, for the world of the future. So it's things like, again, as a mother, I've noticed that there are people who do not have access to things that I'm taking for granted, like computers, like access to Wi-Fi. Those sort of simple things that allow us to navigate, this time fairly comfortably. There are a lot of people out there who don't have that, and I think that there are companies who are in a position to be able to provide that, to provide those simple, like the simple services that really, frankly, everyone should have access to. So I think it's, definitely goes to providing sort of internet connectivity, to providing equipment that might support their workforce. It's about childcare. It's massively about childcare. Most kids are not going back to school full time, and most are virtual. So then, if you are an essential worker and you have to go to work, who is looking after your children? If you are from a higher income bracket, you've probably solved for that with nannies and with pods, but not everybody has those opportunities. So I think that these are all areas in which companies can really step up and show that they really stand behind the many statements they made during sort of Black Lives Matter and during this sort of time of upheaval.
Yeah, it is.
I was just going to add, Dee, I think, when I think about this issue and we think about the pandemic and, the number of billionaires that may, increase their fortunes by 15%, what we're seeing at this point is like a need for this like shared economy, right? And shared wealth. And when we look at years past, you think about Sears, they're not around anymore, but they dedicated 10% of their revenues to their employees. And so in the early days of Sears, people who retired from there retired as millionaires, right? So I'm not saying we have to go that drastic, but there's something about employers being responsible for their people and knowing that there's certain things, I could just call it the social determinants of work. What makes work possible? We need to make sure that people have transportation. We need to make sure that they can feed their kids and they can go to the doctor and that they have childcare. Like that's just a basic. And I think we have to stop now that we know that that's been exposed. We can't go back to the way it was, accepting less than that. I think as women, women and men, right, are advocates. We need to say these are non-negotiables, not just for the senior executives and high executives, but for everyone, right? When I was an executive Nokia, they sent me back to INSEAD Business School in France and spent literally, tens of thousands of dollars on me getting an advanced degree. Like, I greatly appreciated that, but I could have afforded that on my own. What about the junior employee who really needs that? And so we should think about training as a benefit for everyone that we deserve, right? Not something that's just something for the people who are at the highest on the ladder.
Well, that is a perfect segue into our question from Chris Hames has a question for us. A lot of platforms are focused on senior women and talent. What about those that are younger, new into their roles, who need development? How does this look in the transformation of work? So I'm going to, Angela, why don't I start with you? What are your thoughts on this in terms of what platforms can do in order to help younger people in their development and embracing what we all know could be a better workplace for everybody?
Absolutely. We're starting to see companies differentiate themselves by doing that now. So you see Walmart, for example, they have a partnership with Guild Education where their associates can go back and start their advanced degree or associate's degree for $1 a day. There's Merit America. So the thing about it, I always say the programs are there. The business model is there. Now it's just about the willingness, right, of companies to take advantage of these. There's models out there that have made them affordable, that also look at income share agreements to make this training affordable. Now it's just up to employers and for us to really begin asking employers to adopt these programs.
Dee, I'm going to pose the same question to you. Many of your network are established, experienced entrepreneurs and founders. How can they help younger generations to develop into the kind of workforce that will solidify some of the things that what we're talking about right now?
Yeah, I mean, the mantra that we use within the We Suite is that we pay it forward, back, and sideways. right? And so it's not just about supporting one another. It's really about women who want to pay it forward and who want to see a more equal and more level workplace in the future. And so most, I would say almost, every member within the community is mentoring or sponsoring in some form. And I strongly believe in the idea of sponsorship in particular. I think that there are training opportunities out there for younger people. I see a lot of them, and I definitely see a lot of networks geared towards young people. And so I think that they exist. For me, the issue is, we put a huge amount of emphasis, particularly when it comes to women, on training them. So as if that is the sort of be all and end all, as if, we identify societal problems and we think, oh, well, it's, women just need to get better at doing this. They need to get better at asking. They need to get better, and I think that training is important, but it's really about access. And it's about who's speaking out for you, and it's about who's providing introductions, for you, and like who's advocating for you. And I think for me, certainly I want to provide a service for women in leadership, to sort of further their careers. But what I also want to do is see them pay that forward by bringing up other young women, and because we all have, believe in the same values.
We just got a comment from Norma, who said exec women need to help those rising up the ranks. Let's share our survival guides. And I echo that. I think that there are opportunities for role models, men, women, people of color, LGBTQ communities, those who have unfortunately not had the easiest road to continue. And we talked about this, and Dee, you said something that really struck me yesterday, is don't hide your hardships. And so I believe that if we can continue this dialogue around this, I'm getting a little flashing warning there. We have a couple of minutes. The one thing I wanted to ask the both of you is on the question of empathy, which is something that's very hard to codify and to measure. What would be your words of sage advice for our community that's watching right now as to how to use empathy to transform the workplace and why that's so important? Dee, I'm going to start with you if you don't mind.
I mean, I think that, it starts, first of all, with really sort of changing your worldview. So I think it's hard to have empathy if you don't really have an understanding of what's happening around you. And so many of us move in silos where we're really surrounded by people who think and look like us. And so I think the first step for anyone is to really diversify our networks. And there are so many ways in which you can do that, whether it's, by joining networks, or whether it's by, what you read, what you watch, where you go. You can, I think that's really sort of the first step to developing an understanding of what other people might be going through that you don't understand. So I think most people, for example, might have taken for granted that everyone has enough computers in their homes and everyone has internet. But what this has exposed is that actually that's not true, and that almost half the population do not have access to these basic needs. And so empathy really starts with, I think, self-education. And then it's really about sort of, using the resources you have to support people. So for example, we go to a local public school. There are, kids who are sort of being put into pods, and the PTA were sort of raising money to help support that, and a number of us spoke up and said that we would want any money that was raised to ensure that everyone had access to the same thing. So I don't want it to just be about me having access, but anyone who has sort of less income or, less opportunities than I have should also be able to tap into that pot of money. And also, local schools that, may have a less perhaps affluent parent base, we should fundraise for those too. So I think it's just really about sort of broadening the lens, through which you do things.
Angela, I'm sorry, I'm going to give you the empathy quickly because I'm getting I feel like I'm on the Oscars and the music is starting to play.
I just think, we've just been put in a global timeout, right, with coronavirus. I just want to leave everybody with, we know that it wasn't normal before. We cannot go back to that state. We can't unsee what we've seen. And so people vote with their dollars, how they spend, what they buy, who they choose to buy from, who they choose to spend their time with, their social capital, who you're connecting with on LinkedIn. Every choice that we make, we're making a more equitable world or an inequitable world. So it's very easy. We don't have to make this complicated, right? But every decision being really intentional about how you're using your time, your resources, and your talents.
This was extraordinary. I want to thank all of you, both of you, for being part of this. I am going to give you one moment to plug how everybody can get in touch with you, what your platforms are, and then Juliet would be loath if I didn't ask you, like, how do you power forward moving into fall 2020? So I'll start with you, Angela.
Yeah, so I power forward, through fall, just with radical self-care. And when I say empathy, it's also having empathy for myself, right? We try to do it all in the beginning of the pandemic. I was like, I'm going to be stronger, I'm going to work out, and I'm going to do this and that. And part of it was like, can I get through this moment sane and with my family healthy? So that's how I power through, giving myself grace. And would look forward to partnering with any of the innovators who have ideas on the line. They can Google New Profits and Future of Work, and they will find our information, or they can follow me on Twitter at AngJack, ANGJCK.
Excellent. And Dee, what's your power forward for fall?
My power forward.
Cashmere and leather, and now it's not that important anymore.
I don't know. I think the way that I've managed to power forward through this period is just by being more nimble, and just just pivoting comfortably and quickly. And so I've really sort of developed and honed that skill of not really feeling too sort of wedded to any one idea or any one mode of operating, and just moving quickly to respond to things. And so I think it's all about being nimble going forward. For anyone who wants to contact me or join the community, it's thewesuite.com, so WIE suite.com. So it sounds like the C-suite, but it's for women who think bigger than the C-suite. So please do reach out.
This was amazing. We could go on all day. We didn't even get into the Facebook backlash. We had all these others, so we'll save that. I want to thank both of you so much for the important work that you do. I am more optimistic after our session than I was before, and I feel like with this much energy and this much focus, perhaps we will smash these archetypes and this mythology about what it is to be an employee in the United States. Now what happens? What happens now on the Zoom?
Thank you.
Juliet just appears.
That was awesome. What an amazing session to end on. Thank you. Gina, Dee, and Angela, that was so, I don't know, it's just left me with a lot of thoughts. And I think the words that come to mind: community, empathy, and access. I love the idea of sharing our survival goals. I think the importance of diversifying our networks and self-education to drive empathy forward is critical. And I love, Angela, what you said about radical self-care. Thank you all so much. And I would say, if anyone listening wants to connect with any of the speakers during today, please do reach out to us or to me, or community@worth.com if you didn't catch any of those connections. Gina, what's your power forward for 2021?
I think that I agree with Angela. I believe that I have set my expectations differently at the beginning of this. I just pressed refresh constantly. And now it is, what can I achieve? What can I get done? My power forward, to be honest, is I would like to see some people in real life. And so even if I have to sit 6 feet away from you with a mask on, I'm going to give myself the gift of in-person communication, because for as much as I embrace the future of work, and at the Second Shift, we're all about flexibility and remote, I'm feeling it in my soul that I miss collaborating. I never thought I would miss a conference, but man, do I miss conferences.
And hopefully today kind of makes up for some of it. I know it's not in real life, but I think
no, today was extraordinary. I learned so much, and I feel like, as I said before, I'm not joking around. I feel far more optimistic after all of today's sessions than I did this morning reading the New York Times.
I was gonna ask you that, because some of the key things that we heard today, every dollar we spend, every dollar we invest is a vote, and women can change the world if we vote for businesses that reflect our values and leave a positive impact on the world. We must demand to be at the table, must demand progress for women, according to Ashley Etienne, but we also have to give ourselves credit for the progress that's already been made. Chris, in talking about empowering employees, a huge part of this is getting out of our own way, which I couldn't agree with more. And I think just what we talked about around the transformation of work, when we think about the future of work now, we have to think of something more empathetic and more work focused that works for everyone, which is something you've been talking about for a long time. How do you see life and the world changing once we sort of get out of this pandemic, Gina?
Well, I'm hopeful that we will embrace the lessons that we've learned from this remote revolution that we're all participating in right now, whether or not, for many of us, whether or not we wanted to, and the realization how fortunate we are to be able to be on this Zoom conference today. But where I'm hopeful is the workplace will become a place of innovation. It'll become a place of collaboration. It won't be, I believe those companies that will win and will attract and retain the best talent will have a toolbox, and they will work with employees in a variety of different ways. And I'm hopeful that we will have dispelled some of the mythology around what it is to be an employee. And I think, as both Angela and Dee and many of your other panelists today said, the workplace wasn't working for most people. It was working for one specific archetype. And that's been revealed at this point. And we've shown as a workforce that we can get our stuff done anywhere. Imagine what would happen if we weren't afraid to go to the grocery store. I mean, that's kind of how I feel.
Right. So companies need to be nimble as well as people, as Dee was saying.
Yeah, and we have to give up on some of the ideas of what we thought was important at the office. I mean, you can't, if the way that our leaders look at moving forward is to let's get back to the way things were, we're gonna have trouble, especially with the younger workforce.
Yeah, I agree. Thank you, Gina, and thank you for everyone that joined us today for an incredible day one of our Virtual Women and Worse Summit. I'd also like to say a huge big thank you to our partners again, UBS, Indeed, LG Signature and New Music USA, and also to all of our amazing speakers that we heard from today. A huge thank you to all of you that also tuned in and for your thoughtful questions. Join us tomorrow for another great day of programming. We'll be opening tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern Time with Wade Davis, Head of Inclusion at Netflix, who'll be giving a keynote on the importance of self-reflection. Other sessions include activating progress for women, advancing your career through self-advocating, how to thrive in a male-dominated industry, how to get on a board, and also our member session on the importance of financial empowerment. If you're interested in becoming a member, please do email us at community@worth.com or register your interest, or you can go to subscribe on worth.com and register your interest there. We would love to have you join the member community. With that, I will say have a great evening, stay safe, stay well, and look forward to seeing you tomorrow. Thank you, everyone.